Okay, guys, back for hour number 3. So where have we got to? Okay. I'm just in the middle of reading Jim Skim Pivot's thing about where we got to. Here we go. It, okay, so one US president couldn't hide an office burglary, and another one couldn't hide a semen stain. But NASA fooled every space agency PhD on Earth and held them and all of their Apollo astronauts to total silence. Right? Well, can I quote a very famous liar, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, the guy who said the lie is the ultimate, the truth is the enemy of the state. He also said, very interestingly, the bigger the lie, the easier it is to get people to believe it. Things like burglaries, Watergate, stuff like that. The president, shagging the bloody intern. That's one thing, okay? That's normal stuff. Duck ponds and expenses scandals among British MPs. That's normal. Princess Anne's dog biting someone. That's normal stuff. This is beyond normal. You see, this is outside the Overton window of established, acceptable things that go wrong, and the implications of it are so far worse. Then that's why it's not the information flow. I think you're just seeing these because the information flow would be so much greater with the fake moon landing than this. It couldn't be covered up the same way this can. It's not the information. It's not the information flow that's the point here, though, Jin. Is that Jin? Yeah, it is the subconscious effect it has on human minds and culture based on its implications. If you could launch 13 3,000-ton Saturn V's without a single loss of vehicle, they're landing 14 tons in no air and 16G, relatively speaking, not a big deal. You already did the hardest part of the launch pad. Well, there was a Saturn rocket lost actually. Well, I think it had brought it to orbit, and I can't remember what happened. I think it was Apollo 7. But they worked remarkably well, these things, didn't they? There was only one major malfunction, which was, of course, was Apollo 13, and even that ended happily. Jin continues. A couple of things. I'm not here to persuade anyone over to my position. I'm here to expose lies and cheats, both of which use partial and fragmented crumbs of material to which they attach uninformed opinion and sensation, out with any regard for science or unaltered record itself. All right, you just proved us wrong, Jin. Well done. The WTC is irrelevant. WTC? Who talks about WTCs? I don't know. Is irrelevant here. World Trade Center? There's a lot of unknowns, but none surround the collapses, and the collapses are backed by sound physics. Yes, Where Do the Towers Go by Dr. Judy Wood. Very sound indeed. The WTC was designed to withstand wind loads of 30 times a large commercial aircraft's mass pushing at the tower's upper levels. It was not designed to cope with intense fire, expanding floor trusses, and shift of the entire center of gravity above a traumatic structural breach. World Trade Center 7 came down for a very similar reason to the Twin Towers, a progressive collapse due to fire causing sagging and collapsing floors. Really? Well, surely, see, if that happened, how did it turn into a cloud of dust? How did that happen? How did you could even see it happen? You could even see the pieces dissolving in midair. Half the building's gone and nothing's even struck the floor at one point. Moon landings are proven by rock samples. Third-party acquired telemetry from the moon. Really? From the moon? Not just from... You're not talking about bloody Jodrell Brank, are you? Because we dealt with that a while ago. I can't remember what they said. And complete lack of one crumb of hoax evidence, either from any point prior to Apollo 11, when all this allegedly covert and logistically complex stuff was going on, or after, when all we have is personal opinion, lies, and ignorance-based bullshit. Jack Burns. Jim Skim Pivot is replying to Jack Burns. Where is Jack Burns? I can't even see him. He sort of disappears. I think he may have deleted some of his comments. Quote, have you ever exposed lies and cheats in the government or media? Jin replies, the government tend not to make inept statements about the alleged Apollo hoax evidence. But as for the media, assuming this includes social and print publishing aspects, yes, absolutely, I have. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure even Gin Skin Pivot will admit, governments do tell terrible porkies sometimes. And now we come back to 9/11, I think. Building 7 didn't freefall. Q Ben, yes it did. Jack, Max, you can read my mind. I can't believe it. He's psychic. He's Uri Geller. The problem, freefall's not the word. It's dustified. Put it that way. The problem is woos start the timer when the outer walls start to fall and not when the mechanical penthouse starts to drop as they should. No, they all right, they don't. It's not the timing, yeah, but why does that happen? I mean, Ian R. Crane used to talk about this. Have you seen the interview with Danny Javenko? He talks about, you see, this is when I'd love to just be able to have all the details here, and I can just, because it would take me like about 5 minutes to find each of these details, in which case this comment reply video would be 3 days, just like Woody Black said it would. But no, Danny Javenko, demolition engineer, look that up. The collapse had already started before they see the outer walls go. There's videos on YouTube clearly showing the woo's deliberate deception. Max, yeah, can you find me another building that collapsed in the same way? Another building with a similar structure that collapsed the same way. There's a little challenge for you. And sorry, not Max. It's Max Q. Okay. Max Q says to Jack, "You're comparing apples and oranges. Oranges. Not a good place to start an investigation. A car crashed on a freeway today. All occupants were killed. In other news, a car crashed on a freeway today. Occupants required minor cuts and bruises. Get it? Well, those are obviously two separate incidents, aren't they, Max?" Jack Burns also says to Max, "You're comparing two different events and expecting the same outcome. You brought up the Grenfell Tower fire and compared it to Building 7, not me." No, Grenfell Tower is totally different. The actual structure of Grenfell Tower remained. The actual building itself was gutted. Max Q, Jack Burns, "I'm not your pal. You tried to compare the Grenfell Tower fire to Building 7 collapse. I pointed out you can't do that and expect the same result. It's time to put that shovel down." No, the thing is, Max, what happened to Grenfell... Firstly, I think Grenfell Tower is a different design. Yet, if you notice that it also didn't build... It was also another no-show, wasn't it? It didn't collapse. Why didn't it collapse into its own footprint at free fall speed? Jack Burns. Grenfell Tower's structure wasn't compromised. This is Jim replying to Jack. I think Jack's deleted his comments. Grenfell Tower's structure wasn't compromised by high-speed impacts in the shape of a commercial jet airliner. Well, funnily enough, neither was WTC-7, which shifted the centre of gravity on the upper floors. Grenfell Tower's construction was primarily a concrete and rebar substructure with concrete floors, gapped horizontally to slow fire spread from within. The floors were basically part of the outer walls and did not sit on steel trusses which could warp and expand in fire. The floors were also not burdened by substantive office equipment and a four-seat aeroplane. Well, there was a residential building. They had furniture. But again, you're right about it's a different design. But there are other buildings of the same design which also collapsed in a different way. Grenfell Tower's fire spread out of control because it had multiple methods of reaching other floors via the building's exterior. This included the flammable cladding and materials behind it burning mostly unseen. Yeah, that was a big scandal. This is akin to a leak in a network of insulating water pipes. The leak itself is never just behind where it appears outside the insulation. The firemen heard jumpers hitting metal roofings, not explosions. I don't know. Well, they didn't even hear explosions. What they heard was it was actually water. Dr. Judy Wood has said that the water didn't it was actually water tanks that essentially the water was outgassing, to use that word. Alleged thermite tears on girder stumps photographed after the collapse were simply acetylene torch remnants from the effects to clear debris. Yeah, I agree with that. Thermite was never used in the demolition. If the demolition was used on WTC-7, how is it there were no reports of blast, no reports of key columns being warped with canvas and fencing in order to muffle said blast? Because explosives were not used. But the WTC was meant to withstand the impact of aeroplanes. Yes, both towers did just that. The jet fuel fires running riot did the rest. The subject here is Apollo. Now run along, there's a good lad, Max Q. If you start the time after the collapse has started, you're actually going to get the... Oh, we've been through that. Danny Javenko's interview with Ian... Well, not Ian R. Crane. Ian actually played it at an event, but it was an interview with someone else. He's a Dutch guy. It's subtitled. Alright, Jin to Jack. I specifically mentioned WT7. No evidence of demolition. I agree. There's no blast because there was no explosives. There's no thermite. It was a directed energy weapon based on the Hutchison effect, which doesn't make any noise. This subject is Apollo. Get on or get on it or get lost. Jin, I know we're off topic here, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you're the one who's also discussing this subject. And Jack replies, I agree on the subject is Apollo. The series of replies is messy, and so I'm going to delete my... Oh, right, back to the third one I made. Okay, fair enough, Jack. Jack, there's nothing wrong, actually, if you want to go off topic here. I think other conspiratorial elements of society are relevant to what we're talking about here. I think it's relevant to the moon landings because it is connected. Because again, it's a major deception played on individuals within the. Oh, hang on, where are we? Okay, there's a thread there. That's the end of that thread. Oh, hang on, no, it's the same thread with individuals played between the state and the individual people. Yeah, a very long thread that was. Okay, Charles Scott says on reply to comments 71. Alright, what's this about, Charles? And as I said, I'm not going to address this unless it's something original. It ends now, Charles. You presented me an unfalsifiable hypothesis. Yep, as I thought. As I thought, Charles. That is what you were doing. Therefore, I'm afraid I just don't want to go through this anymore. I've had enough of it. Why don't you talk about Roswell again? I really liked your post on Roswell. It really was good. Bright Cleric 58 says on Apollo Detectives. Hey Marcus Allen, did the USA have spy satellites before Hexagon was launched in 1971? Why do you fail to mention the Corona series that operated through the 60s? Could it be that is because you know they were unpressurized, exposing film to the vacuum of space for several weeks and yet worked fine? Barring some initial static discharge issues that were soon largely resolved. These were photos for surveillance when image quality is a priority. There is a video of Phil Pressel talking about Hexagon where he says, for all to hear and see, as opposed to Marcus Allen's biased recollection, quote, because if the film is in space in a vacuum for an extended period of time, the emulsion would, and the water in the film would evaporate, so we had to keep it pressurized at very low pressure, like less than 1 pound per square inch. Unquote. Some of the later Hexagon missions lasted up to 275 days. This is why it was pressurized while Corona did not need it. Heating, cooling, radiation, absorption and outgassing all have a time element that can be controlled to a greater or lesser extent. The AD seem to think that physical processes occur instantly. Right, well, Derek, I don't have an answer to that. I don't. Obviously, we've presented to you, there has been 2 experiments done now with films in vacuum chamber, which can contradict that. But maybe Marcus can answer that. I don't know. Cleric 58 says here, on the same video, has Scott Henderson done his gain loss calculations for Apollo transmissions between Moon and Earth yet? Remind him not to confuse DB and DBM. Steve mumbling, Henderson couldn't spell DB. Well, if you look at the version here, you can see that the documents are there, can't they? The documents actually have been published. Like she has presented actually written data, and indeed he's covered this on his own channel. Cleric 58 says here on the same video, Marcus Allen gave a talk. Oh no, I'm not. Oh, not that again. Before. In Interplanetary Society in 2011. Before and after, he's on record stating that the landings never happened, and yet at this meeting he was asked... Look, I'm not going to go through that again. Cleric 58, we actually do address that in one of these... Oh, actually, because maybe I could, if I read this, I can actually go through this. BIS member, Marcus, you said something right at the beginning. You said, I do not doubt that men landed on the moon. Is that correct? Marcus Allen, correct. So in fact, you're not advocating that man did not land on the moon. Correct. BIS member, but surely saying that to try and make this a more aesthetically delightful visual epic. Some of the photograph was hammed up in a studio somewhere. Marcus, the Apollo record was enhanced. Right. That's not... No. Right, yes. This is basically where Marcus... The words... I'm glad you've actually reproduced them word for word, Cleric, because other people like Steve Mumbling don't do that. Let's look at what he says here. He does not doubt that man landed on the moon. I don't doubt man landed on the moon. I think they're there today. I think there are probably very large numbers. And also I believe it's quite likely that humans have been walking on the moon since at least the 1940s, much earlier than history tells us. So if someone asked me, do you think you saying nobody's ever walked on the moon, I would say no. I think they have. And the BIS member actually asked him to clarify, and he says correct. And but merely saying that to try and make this a more aesthetically delightful visual epic. Some of the photography was hammed up in a studio afterwards. Marcus, the Apollo record was enhanced. At no point is Marcus confirming the Apollo missions happened as we've been told. So it's to say that Marcus is like shopping and changing is completely incorrect. Yes, I'm glad you actually did that. Actually, now we've got a thread again. Jim Skin Pivot says, "So gets owner does the mumbler." Yeah, that's me. Hang on, paste. That's it. Question mark. You want a higher standard of debate, but you actually had to come on at the end to explain how you won 4-1. No, I've already told you, Jen Skin Pivot. It's not just a case of numbers. We were being reasonable. He wasn't. He had Steve maybe just on his own, just like Blue Earth Thing was on his own. Blue Earth Thing actually was on a show with 7-1. You may know that Blue Earth Thing and Marcus regularly debate. They regularly debate on Blue's channel. And I did actually make the point, it takes guts to come on when you're outnumbered 7-1. But at no point was the uneven numbers, did the uneven numbers mean that somehow the single individual was forbidden from saying his piece? And no point was that a factor in him being silenced. How very magnanimous of you. The point you conveniently missed was that he showed your arguably most capable commentator, Marcus Allen, as the at least best a rank amateur and at worst willing to make false statements easily disproven. This fact alone warrants a mention given the odds. Steve did a great job. No, he didn't, and I'm not going to mention that fact because it's a false fact, Jim. He didn't. He's not a rank amateur, and he hasn't made false statements that are easily disproven. David Smith says, I don't think this was a debate. David, finally something we agree on. If it's bad form to add an extra grump to the bolster points after the fact, by all means do a debate review or something, but the original should be left untouched. David, that's happened. There's been several debrief videos, including my own little amendment and my own little appendix here. And indeed, other channels. There's the Apollo Detective channels. Scott's done his own debrief with Marcus and Robert. That's already happened, but the original has been left untouched. Firstly, Neil has uploaded. Neil has his own copy. By the way, my own one is Neil's original copy, not the one that he deleted and the one he corrected. I put it. You may notice the pinned comment I put on there. Did you? Where I actually explain that. Neil did not delete the original video for the purposes of censorship. He deleted it to correct a minor error. The original raw file was available to download from our Skype group, and Steve Mumbling did, and he put it on his channel. Look, if that doesn't, what more do you want, David? How could we improved our openness? David Smith says, Jim Skin Pivot says to David, NGW, who don't know what that means. Neil Geddes Ward, who rather emotionally insists he's not closed-minded, has just ditched his first upload video in favour of another edit. Why is that? Jen? I just can't imagine why he took it down. It couldn't possibly be because it was heavily drenched in posts that neither he nor his four-man committee could answer from Steve. Oh, don't be ridiculous. Jin, you can repeat the same comments on his video, for goodness sake. I've told you why he did this. I said to Neil, I said, you know they're going to completely misrepresent this whole thing, don't you? They're going to totally misrepresent it. Just repeat the bloody comments, you twat. Sorry, but I don't mean to call you a twat, but honestly, that is so dishonest. That's so disingenuous. Reply to comment 71, Max Q. Ben, you have demonstrated in this video you can't tell the difference between current NASA and SpaceX technology. On top of that, you called a super heavy booster Dragon. Alright. Dragon is human cargo rated spacecraft, not a booster. There was only a booster in the video. SpaceX, alright. Blah. By the way, alright, I'm not going to read this out, but Max is correcting me on a factual issue to do with these rockets. Okay. How can you call yourself a space exploration expert when you can't even get the class owners and names of today's hardware correct? There used to be a show in the UK called Mastermind. Is it still running? It's on Radio 4 now, I think. It's audio only. I'd love to see one of the defectives on it with a space exploration as their specialist subject. Ho 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 ho. Nothing as it seems says on Apollo Detectives. As you so flatteringly call yourselves, Apollo Detectives, lol. Thanks, Steve, for all the levity. We have a thread here. It's a long one. Alright, now, this is the pinned comment I put on my Apollo Detectives video, where I just said here, so I said Neil has re-edited the original cut to amend a minor error. This was not done to censor the misrepresent Steve mumbling. Jim Skin Pivot says Neil has re-edited the original to amend a minor error. And what was the minor error that was apparently just big enough the entire post debate had to be eradicated when an explanatory post could have been employed instead, Ben? Neil says, I'm glad Neil's addressing this, actually. It was the presentation of Scott's that did not display correctly on screen and an adjustment of audio sync. Dim. Yes, I'm sure that must be it. TK. I have an opinion, and it's mine, and it's inconvenient, especially for me. Could you please be sorry for me and promise me no lies about anyone called Dave? It's a personal opinion. If it's inconvenient for you, sorry. And then Neil says to Jin, when you edit a section, it means the whole video has to be encoded and re-uploaded. That's it, plain and simple. Yeah, Jin Skin Pivot and Dave Smith, why don't you, all you guys, you Apollo supporters, just put your comments again, repeat your comments, alright, and see if Neil deletes them. And Jim's goes to Neil, yes, of course, and there's no way you can just leave the original up for the ongoing debates in post, right? At least you haven't sobbed about your moral sensitivities being assaulted, while at the same time editing in extra irrelevant material about Douglas Arnold, or a quick loop of laughing Muttley to fire at a guest. And Neil says to TK, personally, I'm making no lies about Dave McKeegan. Alright, I don't know what that's about. Neil says to Jen, if there's any way of uploading a new video directly over the old, then clearly I would have done it, but YouTube doesn't seem to allow for that. You can edit online captions and descriptions, but you can't seem to upload a new video to replace the old in the same section. If you follow Ben's link, it takes you to one of the versions, either the original or the new version. He says to TK, each person in presentation gives their own opinions, as do you do here. No one is lying. If you think someone is incorrect, then you do. We think NASA hoaxed the moon landings. We only present our opinions. Personally, I work with a new satellites and cable technology and have no issues with communicating in this method. Max says to Neil, hey Mr. Ward, why didn't you include a clip of an early Starship prototype when you could have included a clip like this one? It's a rhetorical question. You wanted to show Starship to be a failure and therefore misled the viewers. What's this? How come the countdown's not working again? It's right, I've got a timer on the recorder. I've been going. Alright, 25 minutes I've been going.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
Hey!
We have liftoff.
be able to hear the audio on that. Yeah. I think I've seen this actually. Very impressive, I'm sure. Yeah, very impressive, I'm sure. I'm not sure why that's relevant, Max. But right, here we go. Jim says to Neil, "No one is lying." Quote: "Alan is lying. He claims all this." Okay, been through that. He also claims ordinary people can't own Apollo moon material. They can. Well, there are a few circulating around, but many of them have been proven to be other things. There's Marcus's chocolate brownie, and there's the fossilized wood. Henderson lying. Blah de blah. We only present our opinions, and you are lying. The American samples of the moon have turned out to be Earth-like. Okay, not even partially true. None of the Apollo rocks are Earth-like. One 2-centimetre fragment inside what was originally molten breccia showed evidence of having been formed under extreme pressure and with the presence of liquid water. That particular finding is an opinion, not a stated fact, because analysis shows that for the fragment to have suffered that kind of pressure, it would have had to have been 19 kilometres deep on Earth or 170 kilometres deep in the moon. Well, I think we were talking about a rock that was picked up. I mean, Jarrah White did a presentation about it. Hey presto, they just happened to find it. Yeah. The mission to Hadley Rill was specifically to look for ejected rocks which had originally been part of the moon's first solidified crust. Scott and Irwin's geology training was predominantly in volcanic regions in order to identify rocks originating from free-flowing lava. Hadley Rill was originally thought to have been formed by lava flows. As it turned out, the Genesis rock is not from the moon's primordial crust, and it isn't the oldest sample brought back. Jarrah was talking. I can't remember the details about that. Sorry, guys. Right, UFO Disclosure 2023. It's all gone quiet. First, well done, lights. Tinfoil hat on its way to you. Dark corners. Damn, I was so close this time. Rishi this says, first what? Gary, I'm still waiting for mine. Dark corners. You. This is just first. Nothing more, nothing less. Gary, I'm getting a Mexican hat, one specially done for you. It's on its way. Same video. This is UFO Disclosure 2023. It's all gone quiet. Dark corners. Second. I'm actually going to do a UFO Disclosure video later in the week. And because this is now a month since this affair, and it's still kind of like it's still quiet. Tadpole, thank you, Ben. Oh, you're welcome, Tadpole, anytime. Keith Smith says on the same video, I doubt 2023 will be the year of disclosure either. The Apollo Dunces show was entertaining, though. Well, I actually do think possibly it will be. I mean, I know I said it. I thought 2022 wouldn't be. Well, I called it the year of the nudge, and all hell broke. I was wrong, wasn't I? Diego Rivera, Uri Geller was taught to bend spoons by aliens. Uri Geller, oh goodness gracious me. Uri Geller could bend spoons. I mean, I know I'm not a fan of James Randi, but he did expose how Geller does the spoon bending thing. Geller, if Geller didn't go on about all this stuff that he goes on about, he'd be a very second-rate illusionist. As it happens, his real job. You see, the reason he has this facade as this like mouthy git who goes around doing tricks is because he was working for the CIA and Mossad as a remote viewer. David Splendid Isolation says these sorts of weather and hobbyist balloons go up all the time and have done for decades, and are we to believe they couldn't determine what they most likely are, and that reacting in such an extreme way is a new experience for NORAD? Bullshit is strong with this one. The bullshit is strong with this one. Very much so, David. Especially the massive cleanup operation in Alaska, which is really quite extraordinary. Diego Rivera, letter in the post to Putin. Nice one, mate, nice one. He should have mine by now. He hasn't replied. Gary Robinson says on that video, same video, Ben, mate, in regards to your rough and cough and cold, I was listening to a lady doctor from the USA on the Richie Allen show the other day, and she said it's known fact that the medical industry, not sure if that's the correct term, that many coughs and colds are the result of our natural parasites multiplying, which is something that is affected by the moon and by the weather, etc. Essentially, your body's fighting the rise in parasites, and you end up with a cold and fever symptoms. She mentions that some foods, including carrots, can kill them off and balance their numbers. I've tried this with a recent cold that came with a bad throat and eating raw sliced carrots. It seemed to knock it on the head after just 2 days. Of course, I have no way of proving that eating carrots and avoiding sugar, etc., helped me get better, but it's worth a shot. That is, if the carrots are not being rationed in the UK. Lol, cheers. Well, I wouldn't want to give them ideas, Gary, but because they're rationing. I know they want to bring in rationing. But if next time I get something like a sore throat, I'll try it. I will try it. I mean, my cold has got better now after God knows how long, 3 odd weeks. But yeah. Neil Peel says, that's interesting. Winter soup with French onions has always been suggested as beneficial. Well, I'll certainly try that. It's certainly very tasty. And we have now, Apollo detectives again. Right, Jim Skin Pivot is back. Marcus Allen. Steve, what evidence would you put forward to demonstrate the man has landed on the moon? L-Rock would be a start. Marcus, what's L-Rock? Lunar Reconnaissance. It's not the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Well, that took some photographs. What's L-Rock? I'm just going to Google it. Hang on. The time has gone. So it's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter camera. Well, Jarrett actually made a video about that, Jim, demonstrating how he could reproduce the images created by that, including what he thought was suspicious was you could see a shadow of a flag when that flag actually wouldn't be there. It would have been worn away by micrometeorite impacts if it was a real flag on the moon. Marcus Allen says to BIS, there's more than enough evidence that I'm persuaded by, especially, as I say, the photographs from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter which show the landers where they're supposed to be. I checked the Apollo photographs overhead compared to the LRO's photographs on the same mission. The pattern of craters matches, the position matches. The only thing I do object to is they're such poor quality photos. There is a body of thought which does believe that nobody went to the moon. I don't happen to agree with that. Well, what's Marcus saying there that is incorrect? I mean, so for example, he's not disputing that an unmanned spacecraft went to the moon, orbited it, and took lots of photographs, which resemble what we see in the Apollo missions, the studio sets that were created for the Apollo program. So, what's wrong with that? What does that prove? And he says that there's a body of thought that says that nobody's ever landed on the moon. I don't happen to agree with that. Neither do I. But he's not saying that therefore this proves that the Apollo record is correct. That's not what he's saying. Cleric 58. Do the Chinese still have unreleased high resolution images from the Chang'e 2 than they have so far given us in 2018? It depends what they're holding back. I mean, God knows what they found up there. It's nothing. I don't think it's necessarily to do with Apollo. It's more to do with who's actually living on the moon right now. Jim Skin Pivot quotes Cleric and says, from what I can tell, the imagery they released to NASA is also not at full resolution. That said, one of their agency's top men, Yan Jun, has said traces from the previous Apollo missions are visible in the images. Selene, however, did show imagery where surface topography exactly matches Apollo photos, and both Selene and Chandrayaan-2, that's the Indian one which crashed, have imagery of surface reflectivity alterations caused by the descent stage plume. Chandrayaan-2 imagery also shows Eagle's descent stage, but the oft-heard denier demand for third-part evidence fell silent at that point, and has since been displaced by an apparently more urgent focus on tennis shoe prints, cat feces on rocks, and Earth's undersea cable networks. I suggest you watch the video Jarrah White made about that, about these new, more recent missions. Cleric 58 says to Jin, thanks, I often refer to your excellent website. Something at the back of my mind told me they had a camera capable of higher resolution that they have released, but maybe not. Does Gin Skim Pivot have a website? Does he? Or he, she, or it, or they, or them? They've got a YouTube channel. Yeah. Oh right, I've already watched one of these videos. It's to do with it was the Marcus Allen thing. Okay. Let us continue. That's that thread over with. Jack Parker says on UFO Disclosure 2023, it's all gone quiet. A little discussion on being woke or sleepwalking in the case of radical right-wing clone rebel Trumpers who can stare right at logic and irrationality while ignoring it. Possess flags made of the same cloth. Well, not all the flags are made of the same cloth. If you're talking, sorry, we're talking about Apollo. Sorry, we're not on Apollo now. Well, I'm not sure what you mean here. Be woke or sleepwalking in the case of radical white clone rebel Trumpers, who can stare at the right logic and irrationality by ignoring it. Possess flags made of the same cloth. Jack, I think you're being very, you're turning Mr. Miyagi again. Jack, the partisan bias is very obvious. Only a few, like Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney, can traipse in the territory of instead right and wrong answers. Jack, the system is flawed. It allows the emperor with no clothes syndrome in regards to true opinion on consciousness. Ben, this gravity of logic is obvious. How you might see this as rubbish rambling, my words, is beyond me. I'm trying to comprehend what you're saying to me, Jack. The number of comments shouldn't make any difference. I know, as long as I'm making powerful points. Correct. But you're actually speaking in a rather nebulous and abstract way. Inconsequential discussions of etiquette, relatively unimportant. Yes, I've learned some secrets about health and biology beyond normal scope with empirical evidence powerfully behind them. I'm not going to leave any more tags, or Jack, but I'm just going to go through your comments here. It's not about me, but many participant experiences in science with their own perceptible empirical evidence. It's not folly. We overthink science for the most part, forgetting the simplicity that had the sailors craving lemons and oranges on the long sea voyages in the world. Oh, you're referring to scurvy there. There was a simple cure for scurvy, vitamin C. Yeah. I'm not sure this is relevant. I don't know. I'm not sure this is relevant to the topic of the actual video. But anyway, carry on. I've seen and felt your gravity as thought. I wish it could be more nurtured. Message for you. They don't need to be discussed on your talkback sessions. Alright, well, I would hate to lose your ear. That unmentionable discussion of life experience, maybe I should have left unmentioned. To all of you people, a UFO buff. But really, there can be no more important discussions than the ones I bring up. Important because they are reality-based. And you may know I think something, but you don't know enough to be awake. Maybe it's fear-based to some degree. These are not the ramblings. Here are messages for as long as you may take. Did I call you rambling? Did I say you were rambling, Jack? You leave a lot of comments here, and very often I find them hard to understand. And you leave them on multiple different comments. One main care or not to or not care to that is not the point. When can empirical evidence be realised? What I may think. What are you looking for that may already be found? I look forward to seeing you tight and lean and capable of running a marathon, but not foolish enough to expend that much energy, as some are. Well, thanks for your input, Jack. Sorry, mate, I'm trying to follow you, I really am. Same video, Hatchy. Ben, I'm thinking we've got more chance of seeing a TR3B than disclosure. There's lots of archaeology sites of things they don't want us knowing as well, and it's all relevant to what they were supposed to be as a race of people. Well, yeah, I mean, definitely with the archaeology stuff. As for, we have more chance of seeing a TR3B. Well, people do see TR3Bs. Yeah, but that would be a kind of disclosure, wouldn't it? Oh, we're back on, what's this? Oh, is this another thread? What's this? Right, it's another thread on Apollo detectives. If NASA used a special film for use on the moon, why didn't they share this information previously? Instead, for decades, NASA has stated that Ektachrome 100 with alternate polyester base was used. Steve is being disingenuous. He avoids... So Noddit, this person's called Noddit. He avoids the question of when NASA proposed this special emulsion was formulated. I think it was quite recently. Yeah, we did mention that, didn't we? And why didn't NASA use this special emulsion on Lunar Orbiter or the Hexagon satellites? Even Soviets use pressurized housing on their zondes. Maybe interesting to ask for documentation from Kodak about this. Well, Douglas Arnold said that, didn't he? Yeah. There's a huge amount of material here. I'm just going to to see if Jim has actually repeated himself. He says, I've already asked for documentation from Kodak, the designer of the Apollo surface close-up camera, and some men who designed the Hexagon's photo system. It isn't disingenuous to show a general statement is true without being able to cite specific technical detail. The particular handicap has plagued deniers forever. As we can see here, it still does. So why aren't they also disingenuous? Are you suggesting seriously that all space photography and Russian spacewalk film before Apollo had to be done on special gear, otherwise it must be fake? Are you seriously suggesting that photophysics experts around the globe just kept stum when these photos first appear and then continued to fill newspapers and magazines? If you're referring to Apollo, then yes. Fact 1. Special emulsions were indeed used. This is highlighted in their Egerton, Germhausen and Greer paper, which Scott Henderson lies about in the video. Can I ask you, Jim, did this paper get published before or after Dark Moon and What Happened on the Moon were published? This paper proposed that colour-sensitive elements, usually placed on the film in individual alternating layers, should not only be paired up relative to their colour sensitivity and ability to filter out other colours, but also that emulsion layers of halide crystals of different film speeds be paired up as well. Special emulsions continue to be used up to and beyond Apollo-Soyuz. Fact 2. Stating that Ektachrome is an over-the-counter project and doesn't have special emulsion is all very well and good, but Ektachrome is a brand name relating to specific brand properties of standard, and anything that lies within that line is within the suffix XO, meaning special order, SO, alterations and additions, as in Ektachrome SO68 and SO121. These were not over the counter at the time of Apollo. Oh, well, did you see what Douglas Arnold said on what was it, the video I mentioned earlier? What happened on the moon? I mean, has the story changed? Jim, I'm concerned the story might have changed since then. Fact 3. Kodak and DuPont have both made special films for use in high vacuum. DuPont is known as Consar. We have yet to hear one single denier claim that the world's greatest names in photographic film, Kodak, is a key part of the hoax. Fact 4. Both the film backing material and the blinders in the emulsion were chemically stabilized to specifically deal with unique space and lunar region issues. Vacuum designed to a volatile substance is the same as radiation damage. It occurs over time, not instantly. Pressure vessels in satellites, well, because the film roll may be up there for a period of months, or the film content may be processed before being scanned and transmitted earthwards. The other reason pressurized housings were used is because in the early days of satellite photography, unaltered film was often used, and is still simply thought smart to have mechanics inside low pressure atmosphere to obviate the use of special lubricants to ensure controlled temperature within which engineering would not work. And finally, amongst my notes on this matter, I have the following exchange with Bob Shanebrook, archivist at Kodak, Rochester, New York, a published expert and co-designer of the Apollo lunar surface close-up camera. What is it in S-star which obviates outgassing? Bob Shanebrook. Acetate is made of natural cellulose, small quantities of chemical stabilizers and solvent itself. However, PET is petroleum-based. It is heated, excluded, and then stretched in the form of a sheet, at which point any volatile material vaporizes, and some small amount is locked, or more correctly, baked by the extrusion and calendaring process. In the vacuum, very little exits the material, and what does seep out is extremely slowly, with no deterioration of the film properties within the usable life of the base media. As a result, PET easily maintains its physical characteristics when subjected to a vacuum. When did you have this interview, Jin? When did you actually speak to Mr. Shanebrook? Was it before or after the the late 90s generation of Apollo detectives material was published? Please tell me. Right, this is another comment by Jin. If NASA used a special film for use on the moon, why didn't they share this information previously? Oh, he's quoting now. For decades, NASA has stated that Ektachrome 100 with an alternate polymer base was used. Jim's answer: NASA have to remit the broadcast or other people's product specification. Have no remit to broadcast other people's product specification unless they choose to by virtue of their funding that product's development. As a massive commercial entity, Kodak also would have no reason to trumpet specific chemistry, especially when professional formats and unusual processing methods required Kodak's own technicians to develop film rolls. That is, technical film formats outwith the ability of amateurs and darkroom facilities. Ektachrome, Panatomic X, S-Star PET, etc. are essentially brand names which refer to a particular format, production technique, primary properties, or processing method. Such brand names also have an extensive list of variants for specific tasks. Anything bearing the suffixes SO is special order or NSI non-stock item, as Apollo film rolls indicate that something about the film is unique, commercially unavailable, or has some or other specific alteration as a consequence of its purpose. One such alteration is the unconventional sequencing of color-sensitive layers. We've been through that, yeah? Here's something you won't hear from any of those four deniers, and it comes from Kodak. Kodak Ektachrome EFs SO168 in 60mm and 70mm, Ektachrome MOSO368 ASA ISO 64 in 16mm, 35mm, 70mm, and Kodak Panatomic X black and white recording film SO164 ASA ISO 80. There were two types of 168, one rated at ASA 160, the other at ASA 1000. 168 was generally formulated for the surface and interior photography in low light. The primary difference between 168 and 368 were haze filters pre-applied to the latter rather than being attached to the lens as a separate accessory. Apollo 11 returns 9 magazines comprising 1,407 photos, 515 colour and 857 in monochrome. The special Ektachrome emulsions were never commercially available and the formulas remain secret. However, a less light-sensitive formulation of Panatomic X was sold with an ASA of 32. Quote, and why didn't NASA use this special emulsion on lunar orbiter or hexagon satellites? Answer: because long duration flights required imagery. Okay, we've been through that. Your evidence and research junkies are just so precious. Okay, can I ask a question? This statement from Kodak, did it come before or after the late 90s generation of Apollo detectives, the Apollo doubters publications? Take your time, Jim. Moving on. Okay, so that's that thread done with. Oh, there's another long thread with lots of replies here. No, okay. Where is the overwhelming evidence for the moon landing? One, NASA tries suggesting to us footprints are visible from the LRO, which is an outrageous manipulation for the naive. 2. Retroreflectors, the Soviet positioned 2 of them remotely, first in 1970. That's a good point, yeah. Continually changing narrative. Yes, that's what I'm concerned about right now. That's why I kept asking Jim that question when he said what he did. In 1975, the New York Times published an article describing how Surveyor 5, 6 and 7 probes detected lunar storms, which was actually levitating dust due to electrostatic charges. Surveyor 5 was only 30 kilometers away from the alleged Apollo 11 landing site. Wouldn't footprints be obliterated? And why does Wikipedia now say that Surveyor 7 was the first probe to detect this? 4. The rocks. Lots of weird findings as far as alleged Apollo moon rocks. Brass, yes, the brass, which is a synthetic alloy, doesn't occur in nature. As iron 3+, evidence of magnetic fields, amino acids, different titanium concentrations compared to remotely collected samples, Big Bertha, etc. 5. No animal trials. 6. The major flaw, the Soviets attempted time and time again to return their unmanned probes from the surface of the moon. They found it difficult to launch, locate and rendezvous with their spacecraft in LLO, low lunar orbit. Out of 11 attempts, only 3 were successful. They say that all organisms on Zond 6 died because of unsuccessful skip re-entry, resulting in inadequate deceleration and high G. Before sending Apollo craft, NASA had no success in returning any spacecraft from the moon, either from the surface or from around the moon. Sending spacecraft to the moon is easy. The difficult lies in returning them safely, so it's beyond credible that NASA would not ensure practice with unmanned craft before manned missions. Interestingly, the Soviets claim that NASA tried to launch their Surveyor probes back to low lunar orbit but were unsuccessful, and so claimed Surveyor 6 was just a test of rocket launch on the moon. And we have Cleric 58. The New York Times article said, and it quotes the thing about dust storms, Wikipedia is not the final word in academic research! Exclamation mark. The paper the New York Times article based on was this: Surveyor Observations Lunar Horizon Globe by J.J. Reynoldson and D.R. Criswell, published June 1974. From the abstract, each of the Surveyor 7, 6 and 5 spacecraft detected a line of light along its western lunar horizon following a local sunset. It's been suggested that this low horizon glow is sunlight which is forward scattered by dust grains, 10 nanometers in diameter, 50 grains per centimeter squared. That is quite tenuous. That's not a lot. Present in a tenuous cloud formed temporarily, which was actually less than 3 hours duration, just above sharp sunlight shadow boundaries of the terminator zone. Cleric then says here, the lunar landers and other equipment, plus the trails left by astronauts and rovers, were easily visible in the LRI photos. If you want to hand wave them away, well, have you seen Jarrah White's video on this? Yeah, and he mentions, he mentions Chandrayaan 2. Oddly enough, Chandrayaan 2 had a lander which didn't work. Yeah, blah-de-blah. We've been through that. Is India going to damage its scientific reputation by faking these pictures when its big rival China could so easily embarrass it by showing nothing there? Right. I'd like to see what was going on in terms of negotiations between those two nations. What was going on? Because I've already talked about Anthony Sutton and his analysis of the Cold War. We now have other rivalries within our own world, but could something similar be going on? China hasn't released any images with enough detail to show the landers, but they do show dark areas of disturbed regolith at the exact locations of all the Apollo landing sites. An odd coincidence, wouldn't you think? The evidence is sitting on the lunar surface waiting for anyone to take photos of it with a big camera as you like. Yeah, well, the ideal thing to do, Cleric, would be to visit the location, send a craft that lands exactly at the locations. The problem is, obviously, no one can claim territory on another body, but they are stating that these areas, and I think 1 mile around them or something, is US territory because of the landing of the craft, and they've actually ordered any close approach to those areas not to be permitted, including landings and low flybys. They're saying these are national monuments, we want to leave them and preserve them for future generations. Or maybe they just don't want people seeing too closely, there's nothing there. Nodit says to Cleric, thank you for linking the paper. I understand the wiki is not the official authority and therefore immediately visited NASA's site for confirmation. Nothing was mentioned about detection of regolith levitation. A non-NASA site came the closest to acknowledging other surveyors picked up findings of levitation but remained vague and only referred to 2 earlier surveyors. The paper is quite specific, so difficult to understand this lack of specificity. Cleric says, Nod also says to Cleric, on some of the images we see parallel trails belonging to rovers. Rovers are not evidence of manned missions, just like the Soviet Lunokhod rovers could be controlled remotely. Anyone who claims to see footprints is being deliberately misleading. There are squiggles on India's Apollo 12 images which are claimed to be trails. The first images of Apollo 11 from Chandrayaan 2 were unveiled during a June 19, 2021 webinar hosted by the Indian Society of Geomantics. Ahmedabad chapter. they show no such boot trails. Could the discrepancy be because Apollo 11 images were first received by India's ISTRAC rather than NASA's UDSN? Cleric replies to nod it. Due to lighting angles, not all LRO images taken at a given altitude show astronauts' trails. The Indian Apollo 12 photos showed trails because the lighting was right on that occasion. You ask, could there be a discrepancy because Apollo 11 images were first received by India rather than NASA? What do you mean, the image showing the Apollo 11 lander? Are you saying NASA got it first, added the lander, but couldn't be bothered with the boot trails? I assume that that fairy story originates from Jarrah White's desperate attempts at damage limitation. Well, I watched the video. You can watch the video and make your own mind up. Cleric has just plugged Jarrah White. So, Jarrah, you got some free advertising from an Apollo believer there. What about China? You avoid discussing the fact that their photos show disturbance at every Apollo site, and their scientists talk about seeing evidence of Apollo. What happens when in time they show the images with Apollo hardware, trails, and ultimately perhaps individual boot prints? NASA intercepted their transmissions. Any excuse to avoid the unbearable reality? You're backslapping a bit now, Cleric, I think. Makes me wonder why you do this. Cleric says not it. I'm really having problems with understanding why landers equate to manned missions. Yeah, good point. Or even that pictures of landers equate to real landers. The most logical step NASA would take is to send some lunar module with no crew to practice soft landing on the moon and then to practice launching back to low Earth orbit. That would be far more scientific step to take. How am I doing for time? Right, so 3 minutes I'm going to switch over. Then before sending an actual crew, the unmanned lunar modules could have been released in low Earth orbit and carry enough fuel for translunar injections and be sent to the moon. Maybe they even contained live animals of some sort. That too would be the sensible step. The Soviets managed to launch only 3 of their lunar craft out of 11 attempts, with soil samples back to Earth from the moon's surface. Those aren't really great odds, and I appreciate the approach of using unmanned craft. The Chinese stated they saw evidence of Apollo and very quickly removed that statement, while others attempted to link it to evidence of a manned mission. Cleric, how long does this debate go on for? Oh my god, we're nearly getting there. Done that one. Cleric says to nod it. Landers look just like the descent modules of the LEMs with other hardware and rocks. Lunar rovers, rover and astronaut tracks matching those taken in photos and 16mm film from the Apollo Ascent modules, all appearing in LRO and Chandrayaan images, and you cannot understand why it equates with manned missions. Well, you see, is it not possible? Could that evidence be fabricated? That's the question. I think you've got to realise that we're sitting down here on Earth, and these various space agencies, who claim to be rivals and appear very chummy behind the scenes, are telling us, you sit there, we'll spoon feed you this, okay, and you just believe it. And Cleric, if you want to believe it, that's up to you. But if people want to ask questions, they're entitled to. NASA didn't do it following the steps you think they should have done it. Well, if they didn't follow your plan, then it must be fake. Oh, what a silly argument, Cleric. Might they have actually landed by Apollo 20 in 1975, following your plan? Everything was done step by step with Apollo 8 and 10 practicing what was needed round the moon prior to landing. Yeah, but they seem to predict everything so much. I mean, literally, they've even got the amount of mineral substances they brought back. Even when they had no idea they were going to pick up. The payload was fixed aboard the craft, and they might have had to pick up larger rocks and things like that. It's almost like these are spoiler alerts, Cleric. The Chinese removed the statement when linking sites of Apollo to a manned landing. Well, who would have thought? Cleric says here. I did write that some of the actual landers. This is not it too, Cleric. That some of the actual landers could be lunar modules sent to the moons without humans to test landing and ascent stages. It would be an easier task to load the rovers and apply perhaps the same release mechanism as used by Soviet lunar rovers. There would be plenty of room to without oxygen tanks, CO2 scrubbers, water and other life support systems. I've already mentioned some anomalies in the rocks which suggest that the first batches were derived from Earth's. Oh yeah, we've covered that, not it too, yeah. I'm sure later genuine regolith samples were gathered remotely. I'm not sure why you're specifically pointing to what I think the logical steps in space program should be. Quite the contrary, this is exactly how NASA approached the first LEO explorations, sending first unmanned craft, then sending animals, dogs and monkeys up to Earth orbit before humans. If they used a sequential method for the LEO exploration, it stands to reason they used the same for lunar exploration. That's a good point. Yeah, they seemed to rush things with Apollo, didn't they, Nod it? They really rushed it. It was a difficult time for the US administration, with countries turning towards the Soviets across the world, a messy war in Southeast Asia, conscription, assassination of popular leaders. Yeah, it was a troublesome time for people. The manned landings were a nice feel-good psyop at the times. It's funny you say that, Noddy, because for people who remember it, like my parents, this is before my time, but my parents remember it, there was something almost transcendental about the first moon landing. It was literally like a kumbaya moment. In a decade of trouble, of war, as you say, assassinations, there were race riots and things like that. And then all of a sudden there was this, for just a couple of days people forgot all this and they were just happy. And there was almost it's something that probably if you didn't witness it you wouldn't quite understand, as I haven't. I don't know how old you are, but I haven't. But there was literally, it was almost transpersonal. People describe it in those terms. But now, with so much evidence in photos, videos, audio, transcripts, it's increasingly difficult to maintain the myth. Our cleric replies to this, and we're finally getting to the end of this debate, and I'll have to continue in the next part. Okay, guys, I'm back again, and cleric is replying now to Nod it. You really believe that the fairy tale you're espousing? So was it the actual Apollo launches that put these test landers on the moon, along with remotely controlled rovers and devices to make fake boot trails and place other pieces of equipment nearby, remotely from the LEM, and generally scuff up the places so that the Chinese could see the disturbance at all 6 sites via their orbiters? Was it all set up beforehand, hoping nobody would notice at least 6 rather large rockets required to do it? When Apollo was initiated, Vietnam was a minor skirmish. Nobody had heard of it. So don't bother with the feel-good excuse. I think he's quite right because even though at the beginning it was Kennedy's 1960 State of the Union address that launched Apollo, the war escalated over the course of the decade, as indeed did other social problems, not least his own assassination. So it was the feel-good element of it, I think, is very important. It became that, even if it didn't start as that. Reaching the moon was a politically inspired race that both sides knew had to be done and seen to be done, and the US won it. Yes, seen to be done is the operative word here. They didn't have to be done, and what's more, as Anthony Sutton has revealed, and many others, at a higher level, they had the two sides, quote unquote, in the Cold War, had a very different relationship than they did in public. The only evidence in photos, videos, audios, transcripts, and so on, is that it clearly happened. The Russians sent radiation measuring equipment round the moon in a Zond probe and declared a manned mission following a similar route would be safe from the radiation point of view, although by that time the race was over for them. So don't give me the sea of deadly radiation nonsense. Well, that's debatable, cleric, and this is one of the issues we are dealing with here. Is that true? Is that the case? I mean, did they take into account solar flares, cosmic rays, solar maximum, Van Allen belts, things like that? So this is debatable. It's not nonsense. It's a thesis which could be responded to with an antithesis. Apollo had adequate shielding for the short-term exposure the Apollo astronauts faced, although the fact that these astronauts seemed later to suffer greater levels of heart disease than those who did not go beyond low Earth orbit itself, a secondary indicator of the truth of Apollo, does point to much better protection being necessary for future long-term missions, and that research is in progress. Nodit also says to Cleric here, the Apollo 11 landing site, as per Chandrayaan-2, does not have a visible trail of boot prints. If it's absent in the Indian images but present in the US images, then something is definitely amiss. In 1990, the US stated that their satellite images showed 250,000 Iraqi soldiers with hundreds of tanks poised to invade Saudi Arabia. A journalist, Gene Heller, obtained commercial satellite images which showed empty desert. Brilliant point, not it? I would never have thought of that, but it's true, yeah. They similarly lied about other geopolitical issues, satellites showing Libyan aircraft attacking civilians until caught out by Russian satellite images, etc. It's a feature, not a bug, yeah. The Apollo audio reveals multiple occasions where communication transmission delays with Houston are too short. There were no images for the astronauts posing inside the command module next to the capsule windows of the Earth in the distance, something which would occur naturally if they were halfway on the journey to the moon. Yeah, there's films of them filming a window from a distance, but, in fact, there are very few images at all of the journey. Most are either pre-launch or on the lunar surface. Those that do exist simultaneously show Earth and astronauts together unless they're taken in low Earth orbit. On an answer to another comment, I've detailed the images which depict abnormalities. Video evidence is also suspect, with strange flashes which have been postulated as wires, strange supernatural positions and jumps, which despite the low gravity suggest the use of cables, The Bliss backpacks moving of their own accord, again suggesting the use of cables. There's several good videos of that, and I think the Hall of Mirrors is one of the best. Of the Bliss themselves, over the hours of video, we never see expelling excess water vapour, which would rapidly form ice. In shaded areas, it would, yes. It wouldn't in the sunlight, but it would in shade. On the transcripts, there are also strange omissions. They allegedly took a long detour to avoid a Van Allen belt, but never mentioned them by name. They seem to be wooden when collecting certain rocks. They seem to be reckless in their demeanour, and I don't understand why you think US wouldn't collect or corroborate their own data as far as the Zond radiation levels and animal trials were concerned. It wasn't a joint space venture, so clearly the US needed its own accord, accessing the long-term and accurate data. Cleric says in reply to Reddit, "Did you fail to read what I wrote earlier? Oh yes, please try to read my posts more carefully." I bet this person was on the James Randi forum. That is due to the lighting angles. Not all LRO images were taken at a low altitude. The altitude that shows astronaut trails. Leaving aside documentaries when time delays are edited out, some conversations were when the astronauts were on their way to the moon with as much shorter delay. The messages are also recorded at Houston. I copy and paste the next lines. Quote, "Sometimes the astronauts on the moon answered the first part of a message from Houston, and then the voice from Earth continued talking, creating what sounds like an excessively short gap. The astronauts also sometimes began speaking of their own initiative instead of responding to a communication from Earth and Mission Control. Then Mission Control started speaking, giving the impression the astronauts were answering and were doing so too soon." Quote, "Besides, the Earth-Moon conversations been faked, why would the hypothetical fakers have been so stupid as to wouldn't forget to include the radio delay?" Oh, so evidence of faking evidence of fraud is now evidence it's real. Couldn't make it up. There are no images of the astronauts posing inside the command module next to the cap. This is his quote here. Noddits, about them posting with the windows. So, much of the time the CM was doing a barbecue roll, so the Earth would be moving past the window if it was at the right angle. What do you focus on? The Earth or the astronaut? And you need to have lights on inside to show the astronaut. What about live video footage shot halfway to the moon during Apollo 11? The images that conman Sobral said were a sticker on the window while omitting to show in his video when the Earth moved round to the other window after they restarted the barbecue roll. Alright, this is supposedly the amazing shot that S-Vector used to show, where you see it in one window 1 minute and you see the Earth in the other minute as if it's kind of moved round. That can be reproduced in studio, where you see it, and this is supposedly the last word on everything, but that effect can be reproduced. You could do it with a small standard lamp actually outside the set, the actually command module set. There's no suggestion of the use of cables, and the motion of kicked dust shows they are in a vacuum of 6 Gs. I think you should watch Hall of Mirrors. Not Hall of Mirrors. What's it called? Smoke and Mirrors. Would you use shiny wires in a stage production on Earth? They are black. Well, you see, sometimes, well, according to some people, they deliberately encoded mistakes so that people would. They're called whistleblowers. They deliberately encoded mistakes that people would spot. Also, they make mistakes. I mean, if the scene of Mary Poppins floating in the sky, she's actually it looks like she's levitating at one point. She actually has wires holding her up. And did they get that right first time? The Plis are heavy objects having the same inertia to overcome they would on Earth, even if they weigh much less on the Moon. Well, it depends on the movement. If they're being pulled up before the astronaut's jumping, that's not an inertial movement. What excess water vapour are they supposed to be expelling? I mentioned Zond and the Russians specifically because it was not information coming from the Americans. I might deal with the image anomalies in another comment. Okay, not it says here to Cleric. Oh, hang on. This is not it, yeah. It is you who forgot what I wrote first. Ah, yes. Let's get all good old-fashioned forum speak. Nice one, not it. The electrostatic levitation of dust recorded by Surveyor 5 probe was only 30 kilometers away from the landing site of Apollo 11. So I fail to see how footprints, if there were any to begin with, would persist if the area was exposed to copious amounts of dust rising and falling so often. Well, yeah, I mean, over time, you would get like it would be like kind of rain of dust. I know these things are tiny, but there's like 50 per centimeter squared. Yeah. You could work out how long it would take to fill up those prints. As far as the decreased transmission delays were concerned, attention to conversation reveals that at those places, astronauts and Houston answered specific questions in turn, not spontaneously. So this anomaly was very pronounced. The conversations were recorded on official NASA tapes, so if the delays were shortened, then it's difficult to explain why NASA should do so. And it's also odd that other parts of the tape remained unaffected. You previously mentioned the Chinese orbiter Chang'e 2 and how it detected disturbances in the Apollo landing sites. As far as I can gather, the Chinese mission has not recorded any of these photos publicly, and as I mentioned previously, have only started to identify traces of Apollo, not manned missions. Stated to have identified traces of Apollo, yeah. Cleric Prize here. I repeat, the visibility of the astronaut boot trails depends on the lighting, so not all LRO photos of the same location taken at the same altitude show the trails. There are no copious amounts of dust rising and falling. If there was, then the lunar laser reflectors, and I assure you they exist, irrespective of how they got there, would have deteriorated in their reflectivity much quicker than they have done so, assuming that deterioration is all down to dust deposition. By the way, Cleric, how are radio bouncing? How is radio bouncing determined, or laser bouncing determined differently from that comes from the retroreflector and that comes from the lunar surface anyway? Because you can get a spectral laser reflection off the lunar surface. I mean, I forgot the name of the video where they demonstrate that, but it can be done. You have to point me in the direction of evidence of unexplainable transmission delay anomalies. An explanation as to how such anomalies would occur would be interesting. If the mission were recorded beforehand, then wouldn't such issues be carefully edited out? Again, this is evidence of fraud is evidence of it being real. Come on. Also, I mean, it would depend if they were speaking to each other, supposing there was one studio where this was being done and another where mission control was being done, and it might be next door, it might be just next door. It could be that mistakes could be made in that way, especially if these mistakes were being encoded deliberately into the record for people to spot at a later date, as some theorists claim they were. The Chinese released a much higher resolution version of its images from the Chang'e 2 in April 2018, and while the quality is not good enough to show the landers, they do show evidence of disturbance at all the Apollo sites, with Apollo 11 being the smallest in extent, as would be expected. I'm not sure if the Chinese have higher resolution images. They have not released yet, but if they have, I look forward to seeing them. You have yet to explain why you think it is impossible for Apollo to have landed men on the moon when there were no physics nor engineering reasons to preclude it. The usual denier fallback of radiation was absolutely not a showstopper. Quoted Mary Bennett there. Although it's a major issue for long-term missions. Well, that's disputable. Jin Kim Skim Pivot says here, he joins in now, I'd nod it. There are no time delay anomalies in the Apollo communications. Well, Nodit says there are. There are some examples. We can analyse those. I personally called Rob Williams of the Apollo Detectives, I personally caught Rob Williams editing out the time delays on one of his own videos. This was done so ineptly he managed to drop entire words off the end of sentences. Is this a court or is this an accusation? I think Rob should be allowed to respond to that. Maybe he already has. He's also claimed in a time delay issue from the lunar surface, but a quick check of the material he's used showed it wasn't from the moon, but actually from initial docking and extraction close to Earth. Perceived lack of a delay is always down to over-talking or the previous moon-based transmission being answered immediately after the second moon-based statement is heard. Well, Nodit actually disputed that in his comment. You might also note that in Denier-land, according to Mr. Henderson, low-power radio signals from the moon cannot penetrate atmospheric layers. However, in a different area of Denier-land, it is claimed that such signals can indeed come through atmospheric layers if they bounced off the moon first as part of a subterfuge. Well, check out Scott's new video he's just put up there with Rob. As Apollo clearly baffles all of you, it might be an idea to first explain why your fellow skeptics are so often caught telling the most clumsy lies. Well, again, is this the same kind of accusation that was told against Marcus Allen at the BIS? Because that turned out to be a lie on the part of the person doing the accusation, or deliberate or accidental bias misinterpretation. And I don't know right now. You're not doing the game, Jin. Anyway, that's the end of that very long thread there. We're now on the 4th hour. I've had to put 2 timestamps on there. I'm glad I went through it though. Oh man, we're getting through. No fun, and we got to go now. Right. Oh, we got another, and we're on to another thread, and it's not it again. Genesis rock. After the Lunicod 1 mission, all the findings were shared in 2 books covering all data specifications, etc. The most salient discovery was the rocks were quite friable, and proposed that the rocks on the moon are subjected to constant bombardment from micrometeorites and ionizing radiation which breaks down rocks into abundant regolith. So how was the Genesis rock not so affected? Jim Skin Pivot. That question presupposes that it was always that size when it was ejected. Assuming the factors you mentioned do indeed break down surface rocks, it would be logical to say that it may once have been a lot larger, would it not? Nodit says in reply, we witnessed James Irvin and Donald Scott calling it the Genesis rock. If the rock had been exposed to ionizing radiation for billions of years, we would expect a cycle of the top few centimeters of the surface to become increasingly friable before the outermost layers eventually crumbled away. Neither Scott nor Irwin commented on the condition of the surface of the rock, something which the Soviets noted very quickly. Jim Skin Pivot. Perhaps if you cited, quoted or identified the Russian paper you speak of, Apollo didn't just bring back one rock. And we have now not it saying here, Steve doesn't have an answer for the glaring photo anomalies. And that's the only issue where he is suddenly closes down and refuses to offer an opinion and just waits for the topic to move on. This is the point where he should really be grilled, not allowed to just flutter it over it nonchalantly, make him squirm. Yeah, well, we were trying to like, I was, as the moderator, I was trying to keep everything on track. I was trying to herd these sheep in, but it's more like herding cats, to coin a cliche. Not least because the other members were trying multiple times to respond to each of his points, and he provided us with no script or bullet points in advance. There we go. Jin says, what glaring photo anomalies? Personally speaking, I can offer up a few myself. 1. Why don't deniers acknowledge that the Apollo catalogue of imagery is spattered with radiation? 2. Why don't deniers Acknowledge that the Apollo category of images littered with spoiled photos and film of events that can only occur in low G and in a vacuum. What? Well, so now you're saying that photographs can go wrong in low G in a vacuum? Which, I thought you said they couldn't. I thought you said the film was absolutely fine, Jim. Or was it you or Cleric who said that? What about the orange juice? How do you explain the orange juice splat, the stain? And what else was there? And of course, if you do any photo shoot in a studio, you're going to get some duff ones, aren't you? 3. Why don't deniers deny pre-Apollo space? All right, we've done that. 4. Why don't deniers acknowledge that that the Apollo catalogue of imagery is prefaced by the open caveat? Oh, skeptics love the word caveat, don't they? And don't tell me, are you going to say onus at some point, Jen? You've got to say onus. You have to. You're a skeptic. The original transparencies were copied and adjusted for the best possible quality. 5. Why don't deniers acknowledge that the Apollo catalogue of imagery hasn't been doubted by PhDs in any of the photophysics fields since they first appeared? Then you're going to accuse us of hypocrisy and appeal to authority? Food for thought, eh? Noddit is not to be... Noddit is... says to Jen, I'm not going to address each point in turn as the answers apply to numerous of your questions. The photos which are in question are of excellent quality and allows us to identify anomalies faster. That's Marcus made this point. Marcus said, there's no point saying that we get some photos wrong. The best studio in the world will get some, we'll have to throw out some of its prints. These photos are in. The video showed the errant footprint adjacent to Gemini Rock found on AS 15 86 11617, and also the repetitive rock formations found in numerous other images. All of other photos with inexplicable images are, and he gives a number here, in which the rover tread doesn't match the imprint found in the regolith. In many of the early mission images, the horizon was meters away rather than expected 1.5 miles. With analysis of this other image, experts in photography judged the Earth to have been pasted in. This finding explains the strange size of the Earth, unexplained by lens and simple positioning. The photos on Apollo 11 EVA were analysed by a mathematician, Dr. Koroblov, who saw a 30% reduction in the expected size of shadows on photogrammetry. His paper was submitted for publication, but apparently there's now a question over the validity of the photogrammetry due to an hitherto unrecognised incline in the opposite direction of the landing site. This may mean yet another update, correction, excuse in the Lunar Surface Journal, so there exists enough for questioning of the authority of images. So well done, Noddit. You're not to be outdone. You're standing your ground. There's much more we could mention. We could mention the fact that there appears to be flashlights used or secondary light, things like that. Oh, there's loads more. Jim Skin Pivot. Are you now removing posts? Oh, please. Oh no, Jen, I'm not removing anyone's comments. I've spent how long have I spent reading out your comments, including the really long ones? No, I'm not removing your comments. This is now. I think now you're going to have to repeat that comment. I recommend you cut and paste them. I told you this is a problem with YouTube. Write it in a Word document first, and then cut and paste it in there. So if it doesn't appear, you can always go back and write it again, or just have it on your clipboard so you can repost it if it's necessary. I mean, honestly, it's a trick you learned from Steve mumbling, and I'm not going to respond to it. It's not true. Hang on. All right, Noddit says here, some of the earliest satellites didn't go below. I'll have to just make sure I've got all of them here. Yeah. Some of the earliest satellites didn't go along the third 62-mile altitude marker, so at least had some pressure to allow proper functioning. That's an interesting point, actually. I was thinking that when the guys, the skeptics, the believers, the Apollo non-deniers were going on about, but what about the earlier satellites that didn't have pressurized containers? Scott, in his Scott's work, is all about that, about how there seems to be a logarithmic rise in vacuum effects between one vacuum and another. I didn't expect that. I thought a vacuum is a vacuum, but apparently it's not. These earlier films also used polyester base rather than acetate base because it was sturdier and more resilient to cold. Cold wasn't a problem on the moon, was it? It seems. But I'm just thinking that, apart from the emulsion, did the actual functioning, i.e. smooth unwinding of the film, etc. Yeah. Not it says here, why the sudden détente between the Soviets and the US in 1969? Well, why? Well, I think National Suicide is a good book to read, Anthony Sutton. Why the sudden trade deals, financial investments, concrete factories, transfer of agricultural and health technology? If there was such an enmity, why did the US sell the Soviets wheat all the way through the Cold War and the Vietnam War? Marley Pumpkin says on UFO Disclosure 2023, it's all gone quiet. This is garbage. It's all a psyop. UFOs are fantasies for immature children. You upload this rubbish so you don't get terminated from YouTube. Why not do a video about Ohio? Why not go there? You MI5 shell. Well, Mally, I'll ask permission from my MI5 Lords and Masters if I can do that. If you listen to HPANWO Radio, you'll know that Trevor Murray and I cover that very, very closely in the last couple of episodes of Third Rail Radio. So don't give me that. Why don't you go there? I do go there. I just don't do everything on the YouTube channel. Right, oh, this is an old one. UFO Disclosure 2015, Warminster 50. I love this video. It was very good. It was actually featured in some mainstream media things. Very, very as linked there. So it's quite historical. We have here I thought it was Vrillon Rora for a minute. Filion says, spooky things happened when I went to the cops in the late 70s. Oh, really? Right, this was after this. So the late 70s is after the whole thing really died down, because it sort of died down after in the early 70s, really. What did you see, Frixvillon? Let us know. Thomas L. on the same video. Hi Ben, when I'm stressed, no, not the same video. Sorry, what am I talking about? That's an old one. This is it's all gone quiet. The latest UFO disclosure. Hi Ben, when I'm stressed by work, I listen to your content to help me sleep. You have a very soothing voice. However, whilst listening to this video to help me sleep, you were continuously making me laugh, thus preventing me from sleeping. Stop being funny for my benefit. Oh, please stop being funny for my benefit. Thomas, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoy my content, and I do have a sense of humour, and it sometimes rubs over. But there are plenty of other videos where I don't laugh, which I recommend as good lullaby material. Neil says, Ben is very interesting and constantly amazes me with his intelligent choice of vocabulary, but I often find myself drifting off while listening to him. Once I had to stop listening to his podcast while driving because I was being relaxed by his voice. Ben, you should do hypnotherapy. Neil, thank you. Everyone close their eyes and now just feel yourself falling down and relaxing. Imagine yourself in a field of daisies and meadows. The Crafty Nihilist. Okay, here we have a timestamp. General Biden empties Yukon saucer. What? Are they trying to make him look like a bloody angel or a demon? I think they can't make him look like either, Crafty, because he looks like what he is, a senile old man who's in a position where he never should be, where he's clearly like just a figurehead who's allowed out every so often when the real organisation is being done by somebody else. It's pretty obvious that. Crafty Nihilist. Yeah, why would an ex-Mossad CIA stooge lie? Geller. Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. Yeah, the guy just talks anything he has to. Thomas Else. Charles Scott, you need to change the record, my guy. Even if you're right about the OLM tickets issue, who gives a fuck at this point? It's such an incredibly insignificant thing to get fixated on. Move on, my guy. Yeah, Thomas, I've said this to him myself. I really have. Charles Scott says, I'm perplexed by your comment. I have changed the record in this reply to comments. I'm not talking about OLM. I'm exposing his absolute rubbish and recent lying defamation, which I demand an apology for. Well, Scott, I've had a glance through your comments, and it seems to be you say you have not changed the record, but you're still talking about all this stuff about me that I'm supposed to have said about you, and I haven't. Look, maybe you just email. Why don't you just email me? All right, just email me all the details, and I'll go through them. But I don't think I have, okay? But just could you email me the details? Jinskin Pivot and Apollo Detectives, here we go. Scott Henderson, there was no UV filter. Except there was. Filters are largely dependent on the film in use, and on some Apollo, some of the films obviated specific filters. However, on all mission photographic equipment lists, you will find mention of specific filter types, such as 89B for infrared, and the generic haze and or polarizing filter, which both shield UV. He should also note that specific lenses carried are also labelled by their makers as UV lenses. As an aside, the frequently mentioned denier myth of no light meters carried is also false. Right, yeah, I didn't know about light meters, but I do know that there was no like flash bulbs or anything. But can you tell me where you say? Where I'll find it mentioned. Where is this equipment list? Were these equipment lists published before or after late 1990s? David Smith says on here on this UFO disclosure. I think we're nearly through with YouTube now. Whoever could have predicted it would likely be balloons. Whoever could predict it? Well, people didn't predict it. They said they were objects. Excuse me. I've got a sneeze. Excuse me. I think this is going to be +4 hours. I might have to make it a two-parter. So you're not saying you think it's aliens, but when they announce it's likely balloons, suddenly they're lying now. Let me guess, balloons are fake now, or are they just woke? Well, I wonder. Don't be silly, David. I'm saying now they're suddenly no. We've had two different messages. We've had basically the defence establishment saying one thing, that is the military staff, and we've had the White House saying another. It's likely balloons. It came from just one person. President Biden, a week later, suddenly comes on stage and said, "Oh, we think they're recreational balloons now." Why didn't they tell us that to begin with? Why didn't they just lie to us? In all seriousness, it was always likely balloons because that's what we know exists. Well, balloons exist, yeah, but so do UFOs. So, alien spacecraft. The same way when forensics go to a crime scene, they assume it was a human unless strong evidence indicates otherwise. Yes, of course. They don't say we can't rule out aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot at this point. They don't say that because despite your claims, there's no good evidence for any of those things. Yes, but there are evidence for those things. And the thing is, normally they do rule it out. Normally the government lied to us, David. Why haven't they done it this time? See, why haven't they? Why? You see, this is an analogy, really, in a sense, that undoes your own position. It was interesting to see the guy making videos of the recovery. I guess as it involves so many people, there will soon be a leak. Could be. A Roswell took 31 years to leak, but hopefully, times have changed since then. That was a long time ago when the culture was different, as well as the ability to transmit information. Or perhaps it could just be that they jumped at the chance to use some of the latest tech to get some training for this kind of scenario, maybe. Oh, right, so, the Department of Defense often publishes details of its upcoming training exercises, so we can test that, can't we? If we can find a piece of evidence that was specifically published before this scandal began, maybe then we can. That's the thing. Yeah? A plane flying overhead might not be to keep people out. It may just be looking for signs of missing debris. Yeah, looking for a silver glorified party balloon, David. Really? How much did this operation cost? How come? Why did the guy who lives in that area or works there for long periods of time make a note of how different things were to normal? The atmosphere, the level of military presence. As for sending just a guy in a jeep, I think it'd be better to let the professionals plan that sort of thing. No. I'm a taxpayer. I'm asking legitimate questions. Who knows what equipment they had to make sure they didn't miss anything? Some high-altitude balloons could be quite big, and who knows if they had any equipment attached. In the end, this is just another we don't know, so it's likely aliens. And claim fest for conspiracy theorists. David, did you watch my video? That's not what I said it was. I said it's possibly alien. Yes, it is likely it's alien, but it's not because we don't know. It's because that's where the evidence appears to be converging. If it was something else, hypothetically we can predict another form of evidence. Another conspiracy of the gaps. Oh, the God of the gaps argument. The conspiracy of the gaps argument. If anything isn't somehow shoved 100% right in the faces of conspiracy theorists, then it must be a cover-up. No, not always, but there's sometimes a reason to believe there is. And even if I was shoved right in their faces, they'd still find a way to deny reality in favour of their beliefs. It's close-minded and as far from truth-seeking as one can get. David, that's unfair. It's totally unfair. Okay, back to Apollo Detectives. Gin Skim Pivot. This is going to be a long one. I think it's going to be a two-parter. Good job I didn't wait good job I didn't wait any further longer, did I? Ben, it's all on the Owlist website, Steve. The experiment is there. It certainly is, Ben. If you scroll down to the test shots, what do you see? Okay, we've been through this, and I think you're wrong. And you also mentioned the special emulsions, and you repeat the information you gave earlier about, yes, cellulose stabilizers, crest paper. Okay, you actually have the brass neck to sit there and defend these jokers. Yes, I do, Gin Skim Pivot, because I want you to answer my question. With this information you've given me, was it published before or after the late 1990s? Beetlejuice says on Apollo Detectives, Steve Mumbling only came to discreet the other panel members. To discreet the other panel members. I think you mean discredit. He called people's names straight out of the gate, and it's a technique used to poison the well, and it's the same technique used by governments to make people take that certain medical procedure. He even said experts know best. He may have said follow the science. Yes, that's right, Beetlejuice. It was a safe and effective moon mission, wouldn't you say? Justin Cox says underneath, my goodness, the tears. Mean old Steve. None of his points were refuted. Game over. Henderson should go back to his deep fryer. He's terrible at this. I don't care how many PDFs he has on his computer. All right, Justin, so you're not willing to look at his evidence. Suit yourself. Skim Pim Pivot. UV Lotus. All right. Scott mentions the UV filters again. Just take a look at the mission transcripts. Alright, you've been through these. Time you call these people to account, Ben. Their lack of self-editing mechanism has become embarrassing. Well, like I said, Jen, Pivot, could you cite that, please? I'd like to know whether this was actually mentioned before or after 1997. If it wasn't, obviously, if someone's made a mistake, they made a mistake. Nothing as it seems. Okay, we're back now on 2023. UFO disclosure. It's all gone quiet. Nothing as it seems. My time was apparently on today. This song was playing whilst I was buying my beer. REM, Man on the Moon. If you believe they put a man on the moon. Yeah, I love that one. It's actually not about moon landings. It's actually a song about Andy Kaufman, the comedian. It's a tribute to Andy Kaufman, the comedian. But the Man on the Moon reference is that there was a conspiracy theory that Andy Kaufman faked his own death as a joke. It's a long story. I mean, there's a good biopic film called Man on the Moon. Jim Carrey played Kaufman. It's very good. Red Ocean Forest 2014. The lights were low. Hi Ben, who has the film of the Bigfoot that Derek mentioned? Has it been passed to the lady up in Scotland who researches them? Charmaine Fraser. I mean, I don't know. I'll have to ask Charmaine. And Derek, I can't remember. I just don't have that information to hand. But I know Derek did have contact with Charmaine. Charmaine was a witness actually as well to a Bigfoot-like creature in Angus in the late 70s. So yeah. Tessa1111 says on It's All Gone Quiet, you might have rhinovirus, throat lung thingy that's hit, made me miserable. Claimed to be just a cold, but it can be nasty. Triggers asthma in some. It could be. It might have had something like that. I had a negative COVID test, but you know. She also says here, Biden will use his used copy of the Piri-Reis map as a road map. Well, that'll be amusing, Tessa, because he'll be driving along the road and suddenly find himself on the coast of Antarctica. Steve mumbling, you look and sound terrible. Ben, still not sleeping well? I actually did have a couple of nights of insomnia, Steve, but I am a lot better now. I had a cold at the time. Jim Skim Pivot says here on a reply to comments, doing a video response and the usual damage control defense, Ben, or will you be skipping it this time? Jim, you have an answer to that question. Beetlejuice. The Apollo Detectives 12, Steve Mumbling is a special. Alternative titles. Yes, he's a special kind of twat, Beetlejuice. It's All Gone Quiet. Ben, your skepticism talk doesn't address skepticism. It does. Look, post a comment on the actual talk. Choose the Sufon one. That's the best one. And tell me where I'm wrong. It addresses your false description of skepticism. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I do go through the definition skeptics give of themselves, and I subject it to whether it's accurate or not, and I conclude it's not accurate. Whenever I hear you say, skeptics say, I literally have never heard of any skeptic take that position. What? What? Go to the JREF forum. You could call one of the... listen to SGU. Listen to Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Listen to the episode. I can't remember what it is, but it's the one I mention in that particular video where he says I would indoctrinate her into non-belief. It's where the team are talking about it. You could call one of many skeptic live shows and state your beliefs and have a discussion with actual skeptics and not made up misrepresentations. I wonder why you don't do that. Really, David, have you heard me on Skeptics with a K with Michael Marshall? Have you heard me on Tristan Swale's show? What's it called? Righteous Indignation? Have you heard me speaking at Chris French's Seriously Suspicious conference? I've done it. Well, I wonder why you won't do that. I wonder why you don't know I've already done it. What about Bowler Hatman? I've interviewed Bowler Hatman twice now. I've interviewed him once and he interviewed me. Well, it was more of a debate. It wasn't about skepticism, it was about Ukraine. But I did an interview with him about skepticism. All right, well, again, the great skeptic debate with the late Colin Snuggs. For God's sake, cut the crap, David. How come you don't know I did these things? Adding China to the title of a news story would increase the views in the news. Wouldn't add that word without good evidence, as the backlash would be pretty big. Adding China to the title. I didn't add China to the title. Same video. The beautiful thing about skepticism is it doesn't require a leader. Well, it has prominent figures within it, as every movement does. So when Sam Harris says it's likely to be aliens, he's making a claim, and he still requires good evidence. More than is available to the rest of us. Well, he claims he knows an insider, the same one Eric Weinstein says. But Sam is actually being incredibly honest. You're getting close to an argument from authority fallacy here, just because Sam Harris says it doesn't make it true. I know that, but that's not the point I wanted to make by playing that video. The point I wanted to make is we here have a major time skeptic changing his mind. That's the point I wanted to make. He didn't actually present any evidence that I myself haven't presented. I just thought that was a remarkable eventuality. Also, how can we discount a lone scientist in their garage creating advanced drones? Why is it you can believe someone like Lazar can be so amazingly smart that gets headhunted to work Area 51 alien tech unlocking the key to alien propulsion systems, yet it's impossible for someone to be smart enough to create something advanced on their lonesome? I don't. David Smith, I used to follow KeelyNet, I think it's gone now, which basically had exactly that. It had people, basically amateur inventors, tinkerers, to use the patronising language of the skeptics, just working on their own in their own time, and usually in their garden sheds. I mean, the United States has a great tradition in this as a country. The Wright brothers. Thomas Edison, they started off this way. Right, how much longer have I got to go? Oh, blimey, there's still a few. Oh, we've still got quite a long way to go. This is going to be a bloody two-parter, I tell you. I'm going to go over 4 hours. Steve Mumling says on Apollo Detectives, I still haven't watched this, but I have read a lot of comments. Steve, if you don't need to read really to watch this. If you've got your own version of it, and Neil has his own version, if you've seen that, that's all you need to do. I put in a little bit of commentary, that's all. Does Gettysburg really claim they won PMSL? Well, Steve, do you see you won? You churn up and you mouth off at a few people, then bugger off? Did you win? No, you didn't. These guys really do live in cloud cuckoo land. I'll have to post up the unedited version on this and Neil's version of his video. See how long they stay there. I can see I'll have to make another video to address some more of their nonsense. But you did do that, Steve, and everything's fine. It's still there. No one's removed it. We said you could do that if you wanted. Nihilist Lives Matter says, if the objective was who could demonstrate the most logical fallacies in 2 hours, then congratulations, you are indeed the undisputed winner. Yes. Jack Burns, okay, says on reply to comment 71, I've been replying to posters under the recent Apollo Detectives video, and YouTube's system is a nightmare. Replies you can see in your notifications disappear from the tree of replies under the video, so Charles Scott and Mumbling etc. should stop moaning at Ben for any comments to disappear. Charles and then Yeah, Charles, I'm not going to read this out, but Charles, Jack is right. This is a technical glitch from the host. It's from the host. It's got nothing to do with me. And please, if you want, you keep demanding apologies. You say I've done this and that. Could you email me, please? You have my email address, and because this is obviously a personal issue, I'd like to discuss it with you personally, not on this video. I dispute your accusation. I'll say just that. Max Q says on Apollo Detectives, Fairy Wand. Who's Fairy Wand? Why show a clip of a SpaceX Starship prototype? All right, we've been through that. This is Neil. He's having a go at Neil here. We've been through that. Neil says here, this is basically he's making the same point he made earlier at Neil about the exploding space rocket. I picked a clip of it orbiting Mars. If you watch carefully, the fact that the footage went on to it exploding is the choice of the original creators. I was after a clip of it with Mars. Max Q says to Neil, so Mr. YouTube video editing expert couldn't only show the part of the video he was interested in showing. Why are you having a go at Neil over this? What's Neil done wrong exactly? Is Neil is not suggesting there's anything wrong with that Starship thing. Used to give the impression Starship is a flop or not this expert in something so millions of people do it every day, but you for some reason think it's difficult and a skill. So I'm not sure what point you're making here. Jim Skim Pivot. God blimey, this is going to go on for ages. I'm just going to refresh this. How are we doing for time? Yeah, we're coming to 15 minutes and then it'll be on the 4-hour mark, so we'll go on to the 5th hour. I've got no spell for review. Okay, Jim Skin Pivot says, I only find Douglas Arnold speaking about photographing the moon from the Earth bend. Alright, you need to watch Something Happened on the Moon. Can you possibly quote him saying Apollo used ordinary film? And if Arnold's comments are so probative, though, why have we yet to read them? I'm sure you understand that Kodak's take on the film issue will be pretty reliable, yes? Sadly, none of you have bothered to do that level of research. I, by the way, have. Okay, it's called Something Happened on the Moon. It's on YouTube. It was made, I think, in 1997 or 98, and it has an interview with him talking about it. You can look it up for yourself, Jen. It's on YouTube. Scott cites NASA commissioned research into fill in vacuum as entirely credible. Film in vacuum was entirely credible. Who's that? In the paper, he explains that the vacuum tests they did saw no change in material density. Sadly, he's partially exploits this paper. All right, we've been through that. That's that 3-part. What's his name? Something dumbly something paper. When was it published? Before or after 1997? NASA Kodak data from the time does explain special emulsors used. From the time? Well, why does Arnold say otherwise? He worked for Kodak UK. And this is one of the most important things Kodak ever did. There's no evidence whatever that NASA physically altered any science information relative to the release of books or spouting of the denier claims. Really? Well, how about James Oberg and the book he was commissioned to write, which they later cancelled? It's pretty clear this is an information war, and this is a damage limitation exercise. That's what it looks like to me. I mean, Oberg apparently went on to write the book. I've never seen it, but apparently Oberg went on to write the book independently. I think he did find another publisher. But anyway, Jim says here, let's have a look. I think this might be a repeat of a previous point. Alan Henderson did not test this. All right, yeah. Bloody blah. I'm just checking. Yep. All right, I've addressed that before, Jim. Max Q says on Apollo Detectives, Ben, how you can call yourself a space exploration expert? I don't call myself that. I call myself I'm a enthusiast. Expert? Did I call myself an expert? When you can't tell the difference between current NASA and SpaceX moon-destined technology. Did I call myself an expert? Yeah, I made. All right. Remember in your reply to comments video in response to a video I posted? Yeah, you claimed was all right. All right, you're now repeating a point you made earlier, which is kind of totally corollary to the point I was making anyway, that I mistook one rocket for another. All right, and you end up with clueless. You are absolutely clueless. This is like Steve Mumbling saying, "Well, what would you know about the moon landings, Ben? You think the Queen was a shape-shifting lizard." Max Q, this is not relevant. This is an ad hominem poisoningly well attack. I don't know if I can't remember calling myself a space expert. Oh, right, Apollo Detectors 12. We have Dr. Hildegard Langstrom. Oh, Dr. Hildegard Langstrom, and I am Dr. Hildegard Langstrom, and I am quite mad. That's a Red Dwarf reference, by the way. Is Steve Mumbling just too belligerent and rude to bother with? Yes, basically. Justin Cox, are you... Right, I'm just going to delete that comment, because that is just you're attacking, you're being rude to someone. I do delete comments. Justin just hurled some abuse at Dr. Hildegard Langstrom, whoever he, she, or it is. So yeah, I've just deleted a comment, guys. I do it, you see. Now Steve Mumbling will say, "Well, that's what you're doing to mine all the time, aren't you?" Zoella says, "What kind of salt and pepper mills do you have?" I don't have any here. Why'd you ask that, Zoella? Salt and pepper. Well, I've got some in the kitchen, out there, out the back. Weird question. Unless you saw something I didn't. Did I have one lying around here? I don't know. Bluebeam says on It's All Gone Quiet. Never heard the full Uri Geller talk, but it's strange from such a public figure that says things like that. Well, for him, not Bluebeam. He tends to sort of jump on every bandwagon that comes along in this field, just to get his name on in the papers and on TV. I'm afraid I'm very cynical about that guy. He has a serious serious role to play in the world, which is his work as a psychic spy. But he's only talked about it from 2013. And he is very much a publicity hound, I think. It's All Gone Quiet. Spaceman 87186. This is the game plan, Ben. Just testing the water now. Media coming up to spec. Also, now as they know less people watch mainstream rubbish and the fools get left behind. You may be right, Spaceman. This could be exactly what it is. I said in the video this could well be some kind of massive social experiment. It could well be. I mean, I've just interviewed Steve Bassett. I almost said Mumbling there for a minute. Stephen Bassett, who says clearly that the way the media portrays the whole UFO issue has changed so radically. Something like that is going on. It's All Gone Quiet. Alan Hero Archive says, "I don't trust anything released by the establishment. They will tease the potential reality of aliens and lead us to think that real contact can only happen when humanity unites as one global community. It's another psyop to sneak in the New World Order." Could well be, Alan. I addressed that in this series of films, especially if they come up one day and say, "Oh, by the way, the aliens are hostile. We need to have a global state of emergency to protect us from these hostile aliens." So just temporary, of course. The power that we take from you will be returned to the people when this emergency is over. Yeah, likely story. Like everything that went cashless during the pandemic has gone back to being accepting cash. Yeah, of course not. And I mean, I don't trust anything released by the establishment, but I do ask in this series of videos, why are they responding the way they are? Why are they not just lying to us? These are legitimate questions, Alan. David Smith says in reply, "Everything is a psyop to sneak in the New World Order unless I believe it." David Smith, why didn't you tell me you were Richard D. Hall in disguise? Alan says, "All skepticism I don't like is knee-jerk confirmation bias." Well, yeah, I mean, we have to be cautious about that. Whatever our beliefs, it is something we have to be on our guard against, yes, especially if it is a controlled response. Oh, Probe, Autumn 2017, an old one. I love these ones. And we have the lights below saying, "Ben, I'm just listening to you read this document now, and it strikes me that the author is simply putting down words he thinks illustrates what's happening now." So which document was that? This is from 2017, Autumn 2017, Probe. As you say, many publications have proposed similar. It'll come to me in a minute, Light. It's all right. I'll remember. For this specific author, I think you need to give them your very apt advice regarding getting out more and meeting the fairest. Oh, are you talking about Charles Scott at Fairer Sex? as I suspect this person needs a life. I've just said to Charles, he needs to. Charles, please just contact me privately if you have a personal issue with me. But I'm really tired of your insistence on repeating the same points over and over again about certain subjects. I just like to address. I'd like to maybe resolve this if we can, privately, and if not, then so be it. It never ceases to amaze me with these documents we will do this and we will do that. My advice is to them is to just get on with it, because if you are that clever, why float documents all over the place stating your intentions? It could be because the Illuminati have to tell us in advance, karma. Also, I'm not sure where this control started as reference to the document, but for thousands of years, some, not all, have lived long, healthy lives, with life expectancy extending every decade. Dick Van Dyke is nearly 100, is he? Goodness me, all that coal dust in the chimney did him well then. Last point. See, I don't know about that, because, there are extra Illuminati societies, but, there have been the Illuminati network for all that time, yeah. Last point, were they bothering with prehistoric man, or the Normans, or the Tudors? Or is this document just from the age of where the guy could type it up rather than use a quill? Sorry, Ben, this kind of diatribe is fucking mad. Reminds me of when I was searching around in my loft the other day, and to my surprise I found the original copy of the Bible, which was nice. Really? Did it have a little page at the beginning saying, "To my darling Candy, all characters this is a work of fiction, all characters are fictional. Any resemblance to the person living dead is purely coincidental"? That's another Red Dwarf reference, by the way. In answer to your question, the Normans, I believe, were Illuminati occupied. Questions over the Anglo-Saxons, I think not. Celts, earlier not. Later on, possibly. Roman Empire, definitely. Greeks, not sure. Egyptians, not sure. Sumerians, definitely. It's complicated business where the Illuminati, how they rose after the fall of Atlantis, when they regrouped and they started to return. Yeah. Okay, we have Steve mumbling again on Apollo Detectives. When would you like to come on my channel and discuss your space exploration expertise? I'm sure there's plenty of people who'd love to know why you consider yourself a space exploration expert. Firstly, Steve, I don't think I've ever described myself in those words. And secondly, I would never come on your channel as a feature. I will comment on your channel, but there's absolutely no way I'm going to appear on your channel. No way. White people, a reply to Christy Winters. This is an older video which I'm very proud of. Melvin Sherman says, "Why do I feel you use cultural Marxist as accurate? Not the Frankfurt School. Whatever is a conspiracy, is people like Christy Winters saying we need more equality, or every should be equal? I think this." It's cultural Marxism. I know it's often people say I often redefine it. Some people say it doesn't exist. It's a conspiracy theory. Clearly, it does exist. Clearly, it's the way of using, basically stirring up racial divisions among people and divisions between the sexes and other demographics. Basically, demographic hatred. It's a way of controlling people by stirring up negative demographic hatred with demographic emotions within their minds. Of course, demographic hatred, there's nothing negative, it's basically a tautology. But yeah, Christy Winters appears to be a great enthusiast for this, which I think is wrong, and this is why I made this video criticising her. By the way, please leave her alone. Don't send her abuse and things like that, okay? Sargon said, if you're going to do that, you might as well just send them money. When something Dave Cullen or Jordan Peterson says cultural Marxist, why do I feel this is what the meant with? What's the meant with? So you're not very clear, Melvin. When the anti-SJW guys use the term cultural Marxist, I don't think they mean Frankfurt School or J word. I can't say that word. No, very, very often don't. I've made an entire video about the J thing, and I don't believe that we should blame these group of people for the entire Illuminati conspiracy. We shouldn't. And I don't believe there's an ethnic element to this entire agenda. I know a lot of people disagree with me, so be it. they mostly mean people like Christy Winters or shitty feminists that bitch about equality and how we need to be equal. They do, yes. They're not addressing any particular demographic. They're addressing certain people for their viewpoints, for their opinions, and for some of the destructive ideas they project onto us, which is why I made this film. In the same way, when Jordan Peterson's bitches about postmodernism, he doesn't mean like Andy Warhol or Philip K. Dick. He means postmodern philosophy. Well, yeah, Philip K. Dick is actually a very good writer. Andy Warhol is this modern artist. I know he was. Ironically, he was shot by a radical feminist who was trying to kill him because he refused to publish her book. And later on, she was found to be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. As for that Proud Family episode did say something like Abe Lincoln is a hack or something like that. So I don't understand that, Melvin. It's possible you could improve your spelling a little bit. It's just Melvin says here on the same video. And I don't want to go political, Ben. Also, I remember something PragerU said. Robert E. Lee statue should not be torn down. Yeah, that was when there was this horrible Year Zero campaign to destroy history of certain elements, which I was very disturbed by, which I found to be WTF, and the same with Andrew Jackson. Why he on a fucking $20 bill? Yeah, they were demanding money be changed, all these people be eliminated from history. They've done similar things over here, like with Edward Colston in Bristol. They're trying to eliminate Cecil Rhodes from Oxford, from my history here in Oxford, which is despicable. Whatever you think about these people, how perfect they were or imperfect. They should not be removed, especially because the purpose of removing them has got nothing to do with righting historical wrongs. It's basically about projecting guilt and self-hatred among white people and hatred for white people, and basically all these negative emotions from people, hatred of the other or hatred of oneself, depending on your demographic. And I don't know which is worse, but it's bad for everyone. Max Q says on Apollo Detectives, Mr. Jan Lundberg was the Hasselblad engineer responsible for modifying the company's 500EL data camera for use on the moon. He is not, however, an expert on all things photographic. The defectives have employed a common woo tactic, that of using responses as gospel. Well, Max, you can actually listen to the interview in the same video I suggested earlier to whoever it was. What happened on the moon? You can watch the whole interview if you like. The defectives employed a compromise that's as gospel, even though his questions aren't necessarily within his expertise. Mr. Jan Lundberg, I think that's how you pronounce it properly, was right. The Hasselblad 500EL data camera was not modified to use special film. That's what he was talking about. However, he was also right, but not talking about the Hasselblad cameras used by the astronauts on the surface. They too were not modified to take special film. They didn't have to be, even though special film was used. Was it? It's the composition of the film that was special, not the dimensions, etc. Mr. Jan Lundberg said crosshairs couldn't be used for measuring distance. That's 100% wrong. That's not his field of expertise, and he made that mistake. Yeah, well, so did what's-his-face? The NASA guy who was in that other documentary. TK, so this Steve mumbling is a ghost. Oh, sorry, I'm going to start. I'll have to start the next bit. Sorry. Okay, guys, we're on to the 5th hour now. It's official. This is going to be a two-parter, I think. So this Steve mumbling is a ghost, says TK. Amazing that you detectives got a ghost on Zoom and it looks like a real person. Why didn't you ask about its accent? Steve mumbling's not a ghost. He's a real person. TK, is this another ghost that wibbles your wires behind you? Oh, what's this? This is on Gone Quiet, 107.29. Let's have a look. Oh, let me just go to share Russell screen. Brand, where he displayed a surprising amount of integrity. Oh, let me just repeat that. Hang on a sec. With Russell Brand, where he displayed a surprising amount of integrity, rationality, and intellectual honesty, and he even made some of the same points that we've made long before. I didn't see anything. Hang on.
I think he's kind of been handed a pass to do this because of the way.
I'm terribly sorry. I'll
it's so-
just have another look. Hang on. Let's try and do this once more.
With Russell Brand, where he displayed a surprising amount of integrity, rationality, and intellectual honesty, and he even made some of the same points that we've made long before. And
Right, TK, I can't see any wibbling of wires. I thought you think. Do you mean the things on my bed where that flag is? I can't see it. I didn't see it move. No. But I'm sorry, TK. I don't know. Jacob's had a watch party introduction. Neil Duran says the scariest film I've ever seen. It is bloody scary, and yeah, it really is. I'm sure it is the scariest for a lot. Okay, white people reply to Christy Winters again. Melvin Sherman. And also with something like Gone with the Wind. Okay, I do not believe this like 1934. In that case, Gone with the Wind would not be allowed to be seen anywhere, like every single website, not like HBO Max, but every single website. And also all DVD and Blu-ray would be gone, or the government would come and take your copy of it. Well, it was actually withdrawn from sale for a while, Gone with the Wind. I think it may be back now, but it was definitely withdrawn from sale. And there was campaigns to ban it, which is really ridiculous considering it's the first film in which a non-white actor, an actress in this case, receives an Oscar, the lady who plays the maid. This Apollo Detective Swell, Max Q. Henderson is again talking rubbish when he claims cell phones don't work in the Shetland Islands. There are some areas where coverage can be patchy, but this isn't unusual. Even in large cities, you can use a signal checker to check this. Well, maybe Neil can comment on this because I know he spends a lot of time in the Northern Isles. Right, here we have here Phase 52012 on Apollo Detectives. At 1:30, the square object is a partial boot print. The area is full of boot prints that looks just like that. Fact proof provided. Jack Schmidt puts the front of his left boot down on the very spot, leaving a partial impression. Okay, what's this then? Oh, this is something we discussed, I think. Right. I don't have time to go through all that right now, Faze, but that's something we can check up on. Oh, I missed one out. Sorry. Max Q says the clip Peel shows from NASA regarding radiation in space is about trips to Mars that will last a year and 2 months. The longest Apollo mission was 12 days. That's a defective again, trying to misread the viewers. Neil says you will be dead before you reached Mars. Kind of makes you wonder why on the shuttle missions they took human skulls aboard in low Earth orbit, mostly to see how far radiation penetrates the body, when all they had to do was check out the Apollo astronauts, who has more X-rays if we're told. Max Q says to Neil, so when they do get to Mars, you're going to call it a hoax? Glad we got that on record. Well, let's see what happens first, Max. I mean, people have asked me this about Artemis 2. Let's see what happens. You're comparing apples to oranges. The STS hardware was different to the hardware used on Apollo, and the STS stayed in space for longer durations. You can't assume the radiation levels for the crew in different vehicles for different durations. Once in low Earth orbit and the other in translunar space would be the same. I guess a clueless person would just use radiation data from Apollo for STS, but in the real world that's not how it works. Okay. Finally, we're at the top now of YouTube for now. There'll probably be more added later. Ben slips up again when he says Mr. Douglas Arnold in What Happened on the Moon says it's normal film. Then a short time later almost says Mr. Arnold says it's ordinary film. Ben gets halfway through the word ordinary, then checks himself. The defectives are so used to lying that he had not known some people who were watching would check. That would have rolled right off his tongue. Mr. Arnold says neither of these two things. To see the clip referring to it of Mr. Arnold, What Happened on the Moon, it's on YouTube at 17:59. Well, I'll check that out, but I think I'll check that out, but I mean, I remember I haven't watched that film for years, but yeah, I'll check that out. Okay, now we're going to go on to BitChute and see what the BitChute has to say. I'm not using I'm hoping this won't BitChute. I hope this will not end up with some really long long video, because I mean I can't imagine I'm going to have an hour's worth of BitChute comments. Okay, so let's go to the notifications. Okay. Okay, I'll just go through these. Okay, jet fuel hoax. I will do a run through of the latest uploads too as well, but I'm just going to use these first. The jet fuel hoax. This is an old, kind of quite funny video I did. Denmark Free again said, "You obviously suffer from cognitive dissonance." Well, do I? From why? Are you addressing me or are you addressing the previous commenter? Because we had a bit of a debate about this. HAB said, "This is the dumbest things on the internet. I worked on aircraft. They most certainly use fuel. All you need to go and study how they work and you will understand." Okay. HAB, did you actually watch the video? Did I ever suggest that aircraft don't have fuel? Just because it's called jet fuel hoax. Did you actually watch anything of this video apart from just reading the title? Please do so. I'll be very grateful. And as for what's his name, Denmark Free again, I don't know if you're addressing me or you're addressing this other guy. It depends. My answer, of course, will depend on that. Okay, just going through these comments again. Oh, this the Sweeps Fox has left me some comments. That's cool. I'll check those out later. I'm just going to do my own uploads first. Yeah, you've got this. It's been quite. This is Rapture Days. Oh, this is. I think this is. Is this on my? Is this on my upload or is it Sweeps? No, it's. Oh, it's on. Oh, it's on Trevor's. He says, "Welcome, take care, friend." Oh, right. This is on one of Trevor's videos. One which is actually a video of the radio show we did. It's gone 10 o'clock now. It's getting late. I'm getting tired. But I want to finish this video if possible. I might upload all of it tonight. Okay, Apollo Detectives 12, Stephen Mumbling. Here we go. This is a new upload, so I'll just go through all these. Oh, okay, what's this? Okay. Moon Rock from Green Acres. This is Paul Metcalf. Okay, and he says here, this is a YouTube thing here. Video unavailable. Okay, well, the uploader has not made it available in your country. Sorry about that, mate. I don't know what Green Acres is. Anyway, Paul Metcalf says, "Did one of the Apollo astronauts leak Tang beverage out of the seal in his helmet and contaminated some film? If this is possible, so is the possibility of the wet flag?" Well, apparently, Paul, I hear it was actually I hear it was orange juice. But yes, basically, there is a film, a picture which has a stain on it, and they says it's caused by orange juice from inside the spacesuit, which they used to drink through a straw in their helmet, and how that got into the camera, I'll never know. Right. It's a good job I didn't wait longer before doing a comments reply video, I'll tell you. It really is. It's just going through these. This shouldn't take too long. I've got how many? I've got 563 BitChute notifications. New comment. Reply to comment 71. Color Killer says about the transatlantic slave trade. Let's get the facts. Who captured the slaves? It was it was the Africans themselves. There was an internal African slave trade, but no socialists complained about it. Yes, the Arabs and the Africans had slave trade as well. Who did buy, ship, and sell the slaves? Well, I can't answer that. But no socialists complain about it. I don't agree with you, by the way, about that ethnicity. Is it true that some white was attached to the slave trade? Bureaucrats, the lawmakers, and the media, what we now call socialists. So we see that socialists lie and blame others for their own crime. Must not forget the elite, that was part of it too. They benefit and control the slave trade, and now they control the socialists to cover up their crime. Well, Colour Killer, yeah. I mean, I don't agree with everything you say there about some elements of this, but basically the idea that the slave trade was something that white people just did to non-white people and that's the end of it is nonsense. Complete nonsense. Okay, we have Karen Webcam. Oh god, what's this about? And she's put the thing saying, "Oh my god," and it's a BitChute link. I'm glad it's not a link to another site with a name like Karen Webcam. Oh right, sexually explicit stuff. All right, it is actually. It appears that it's been blocked by YouTube, but it does appear to be Karen Webcam. It appears to be a pornography ad, which I will not entertain. This is not the time or place for that sort of thing. Okay, that's it. I'll just go to my channel and just go through I will click the latest uploads just to double check. UFO, because some of them, they sometimes, believe it or not, they don't all appear. For example, here I now have a comment that was not actually on that list I just read out. Someone said, I am not Trump. Wrote, the UFO stuff is a scam. Well, the cover up is a scam. Yes, the UFO phenomenon itself is not a scam. It's real. The suppression of the UFO phenomenon is the scam. Done Apollo Detectives. Done it right. And 70. So I've done all those. Okay, so that's BitChute out of the way. Now I'm going to go to Odyssey. Now I don't believe I've got any. I'll just double check my notes. I don't believe I've got any historical Odyssey comments. I think any comments I get will be in the recent uploads. So I'll just double check my notes. Comment reply notes, none. Good. Right. So I'm just going to go now to the uploads I've made since the last comments reply video channels. Here we go. My channel. Okay, so reply to comment 71. I've got these. Oh, so many bloody ads. Shelley of the Red. Hey, Shelley. How you doing? Nice to see you again.
Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO.
Okay, Shelley, there's all these ads. I'm not going to complain about Odyssey's ads. I'm glad they have a funding model now which involves ads. I'm not going to complain about ads on Odyssey. Amen. Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Thank you, Shelley. Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order to you too. Thank you very much. And now I'll go back to the next one. Apollo Detectives. This is the Apollo Detectives 12. No comments. UFO 2023, it's all gone. UFO Disclosure 2023, it's all gone quiet. No comments. That's Odyssey done. Okay, now on to Rumble. As always with Rumble, I'm going to use the HPANWO radio, the HPANWO TV blog rather than the Rumble actually, because Rumble doesn't do notifications. It's a bit difficult to use. So we're going to go now. First of all, I'll just check that I don't think I've got any historical. I've got nothing in my notes about historical Rumble comments. So I'm just going to go through the new uploads. I will double check by going through my email notifications. But this is the first one. 0. No comments on UFO Disclosure 2023. It's all gone quiet. Okay, we're doing them in reverse order. Apollo Detectives. No comments. Reply to comment 71. No comments. Right, so that's Rumble. I'm just going to do a quick check through my email notification to see if there's anything from Rumble I need to look into. My email's not opening now. Oh, blimey. While I'm waiting for it to do that, I'll just go through the most recent YouTube notifications. So I'll just refresh and go to no doubt I may have had some comments made. Okay, so I'll now put Rumble. let's have a look. Come on. I'm trying to click in the search box and nothing's happening. These things do happen. Alright, now for some reason my email is restarting again. It's reopening again. Okay, I'm just going to go to notifications here. Thing is, I do not think I had any. I do think I didn't have any Rumble comments, because I always make a note of them when I get them on historical videos. So we have here Max Q on Apollo Detectives. Obviously, I'm not yet to hear your reply, Ben. So these are comments that are made while I've been recording this, and people have been picking up the notifications. When I say it's not dimensions, it was a thinner film, so more shots could be taken from each magazine. The cameras were not modified in any way because the special film was used. Oh yeah, I think we've established that, Max. We've established that. Cornelius Cruz said here, this was actually this was 12 days. No, where are we? Okay. Well, Cornelius Cruz said 1 hour ago, or you could quit being such an attention whore and just answer it here, since it will only be your usual dismissive drivel. No, I will not, especially if you're going to talk to me like that, you dickhead. If you won't be such someone who mouths off online at people and expects me to somehow show you special treatment by spending hours typing out replies to you, I wouldn't do that even for someone who was polite to me, let alone someone who calls me names. So fuck off. You've got another comment reply. You've got another comment reply notifications now. If you want to listen to my reply, you'll know where it is in the video. Right, Max Q says here. Replies to the question I asked Neil from him and myself have all gone. I'm accusing no one of anything, but Neil must be happy that little exchange disappeared. Why would he be happy? Why would Neil welcomes and engages in polite discussion with detractors, so why would he be happy? Why do you get this idea in your head that when something like this happens, even if it's not his fault, you say it's not his fault, he didn't, you're not saying he did it and he did it for that, you say you're not accusing him of anything. Why would he be happy? Why don't you just try putting the same points, because I know you cut and paste some of this stuff. Try putting the same points on the new upload and see what he does. Honestly, it is a bit that you will get a bit paranoid. Let's have a look. David Smith says here, apologies for so many comments, Ben, but I hope you're feeling better. Oh, that's nice of you, David. Despite our many disagreements, you are very polite. So thank you very much, David. I am a lot better now. Keep going down any more. Nope, that's it. Right, going back to 9 hours ago. Okay, so I'm just going to check my email here, Rumble. I'm just going to quickly skip through my notifications. You're currently subscribed to Mark Devlin's Good Vibrations podcast. Yes, it's very good. Replied. Alright, so I've got some replies from Sweeps. I've been talking to Sweeps Fox on Rumble. Il Donaldo Trumpo, Tulsi Gabbard show. My future wife, Tulsi Gabbard. Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm sure she's already got a husband. Paul Joseph Watson. These are just notifications I'm getting for my subs. Right, we're going back to the 3rd of... Right. Right, we've gone back. We're now back on Liberty Tactics, Stoneface, People's News, Charlie Ward Show. Just going to see if I've got any. I'm double checking I don't have any comment notifications for Rumble. Because if I do, you see, these are just for historical. When I get back to the 25th of February, I'll give it up. It's just, you see, I always make a note of them because I know Rumble notifications are bloody useless. On the actual, there's no Rumble notifications on the actual site. You have to do them basically of your own accord. If you basically have to subscribe, ask for email notifications, and then they come along. Okay, that's it. I'm back to the 24th of February, so that's after the last comments reply video. Okay, so one more refresh, I think, of the channel comments replies. the page. That's it. And now one more check for the notifications by refreshing a YouTube browser and see what happens. And that's it. That's it, right? Yeah. The last comment I had was okay. Max Hugh 10 minutes ago asked that thing which I've already replied to. So that's it, ladies and gents. That's the end of the 72nd comments reply video. Much longer than I expected. It seemed it was only just about like. Probably it was only just over, how many days? Was it just over 2 weeks since the last one? But I knew the Apollo Detective thing would spark up a lot of comments, and I needed to get it out of the way. There's going to be more videos coming soon. Another UFO disclosure video, my interview with Steve Bassett, and who knows what might happen. That'll be up in a couple of days. And who knows what else might happen in the meantime. And I've got to be sorry for my absence. I know I've been away a long time. I've basically been writing chapter 7 of the Obscurati Chronicles, so do check that out. I'll just show it to you. I might have shown it to you earlier, but here it is anyway. I'm pleased with it. It's been a bit difficult. It's been a hard work writing it, but basically here it is, so you can check that out. You can read that and read the former chapters as well. I'm going to do an audio book as well of it, but there will be more videos coming soon. Thank you all of you for sticking with me during my little absence and for your comments. Much appreciated. Thank you for watching HPANWO TV. Hospital Port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.